Hey everyone! Before we leap into tonight's chilling farm tales, smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment with your hometown and local time, so YouTube knows to keep spooking you with more stories just like this. Let's get started. The old Franklin farm was more shadows than soil, even in daylight. It squatted on a lonely patch of land outside Stilling Fork, surrounded by skeletal trees that always seemed to lean inward like they were whispering about whoever lived within. Most locals didn't talk about the farm anymore. The fields hadn't yielded a real harvest in years, and the wind that rustled the wheat, when there was wheat, carried with it strange sounds, bone-like creaks, faint whispering, the occasional sob. But in the autumn of 1993, when Elliot Breyer inherited the land from his estranged grandfather, the whispers stirred again. He arrived in a dusty blue pickup, early in the morning, the sun still tangled in the fog that crept over the fields like smoke from something long extinguished. Elliot was 35, single, and reeling from a divorce that had emptied both his wallet and his spirit. The farm seemed like a sanctuary, or maybe just an escape. He parked beside the old barn, its red paint flaking like dried blood, and stepped out onto the gravel. Silence met him like a wall.
No birds, no insects.
Just wind, and the crunch of his boots on the frost-hardened grass. He paused, scanning the property. The house stood hunched at the top of a gentle slope, all angles and gray wood. Its roof was sagging, its windows dark. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the air was dense with the smell of age and rot. Dust hung in sunbeams like ash. He unpacked slowly over the next 2 days, making a bedroom in what was once the sewing room, boarding up the worst of the broken windows, sweeping mice droppings from the pantry. He found no family photos, no signs of life left behind. Just a grandfather clock that ticked without a pendulum and a basement door nailed shut from the outside. On the 3rd day, he found the journal. It was tucked in a wooden crate beneath the floorboards of the barn, wrapped in oilskin. Its leather cover was cracked, the pages stained. Most of it was gibberish, strange drawings, scrawled symbols, odd measurements, and mentions of the harvest man. He almost tossed it, but something in the drawings kept his hand from releasing it. There were crude sketches of a tall figure, faceless, arms too long, hands like rakes. In one entry, dated October 29, 1976, someone had written, "He came when the moon was right. They left their gifts and he spared the fields. But you must not look at him. If you look, he marks you. If you speak, he finds you faster. If you run, you die alone." Elliot laughed it off. Farm folk and their folklore. But that night, the wind came harder. And in the rustling cornfield beyond the barn, something moved. On October 30th, Elliot began to dream. Not ordinary dreams. These were lucid, intense, and sensory in ways he'd never experienced. He dreamed of standing in the center of the field at dusk, a circle of scarecrows around him. Each had a human face beneath the straw hat, their mouths sewn shut. In the dream, he looked up, and there, looming beyond the horizon, stood the harvest man tall, unmoving, watching. When he awoke, the sheets were damp with sweat, and his boots, he was certain, had moved from beside the bed to the front door. The ground outside showed prints, but not his. By Halloween night, something was wrong with the farm. Animals had gone missing. The local strays that sometimes wandered in vanished. Crows circled during the day now, dozens of them, but none ever landed. The cornfield looked larger, as if it was growing despite the cold, its stalks somehow thicker, darker, breathing. And then he heard it, a slow dragging sound across the floorboards just after midnight. It stopped at his bedroom door. Then nothing. When he flung the door open, the hallway was empty, but the floor bore scratch marks, for long grooves, like the teeth of a rake. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat by the window holding the journal like a charm. The wind whispered, and somewhere in the barn, A rope creaked. Something swung. The next morning, Elliot went into town. He found the library, a crumbling red brick building that smelled like mildew and disuse. An elderly librarian, Mrs. Clay, greeted him with wary eyes. He asked about the Franklin farm. Her face paled. "Don't go digging up what wants to stay buried," she said softly, fingers trembling as she stamped a return. "That land is wrong. Always was. Your grandfather knew. He tried to stop it. But it's older than him. Older than all of us." Elliot pressed further. She finally relented and showed him a local folklore collection from the 1920s. A faded pamphlet, Harvest Rites of the Northern Prairie. In it, there was mention of a ritual practiced by settlers, an offering to a being known as Harrowfast or the Harvest Man. It was said that once every 40 years, the entity woke if not appeased. Offerings of flesh and silence, rituals in the corn, and never ever look at it directly. "Your grandfather stopped the rites in 76, Mrs. Clay whispered. "He thought faith would be stronger than fear, but crops failed and folks died, disappeared. Then it stopped. Until now." Elliot left with the booklet and a sick feeling in his gut. The final page had one phrase underlined 3 times. "He rises when the earth is fed. The one who sees him must take the rake or be taken." That night, the dreams returned, stronger. But this time he wasn't dreaming. He awoke in the field, naked, cold, surrounded by the scarecrows. Only now he knew they weren't scarecrows. They were people, mummified, bound, faces slack in silent screams. One of them moved. Its eyes met his. It mouthed a word, "Run." And from the corn behind him came the dragging sound again. Elliot stumbled backward, feet tangling in the furrows between rows, heart thrashing in his chest. The dragging sound was closer now, not chaotic or fast, but deliberate, calculated, like something ancient and patient had waited long enough and no longer needed to hurry. He turned to run, but the field was different now. The rows twisted, the stalks pressed in like walls. No matter where he turned, the corn hemmed him in, groaning in the windless dark. And behind him, the rake-like scraping grew louder. Then a whisper. It wasn't the wind. It was words. A voice. Low, husky, wrong. "You saw." Elliot stopped. Not by choice. His legs refused to move. His chest tightened. The whisper came again, now in his ear, but the breath was cold and behind him. "You looked." He spun. Nothing. No, not nothing. The corn wasn't corn anymore. Not fully. The stalks were arms. Pale and papery, bent at wrong angles, ending in too many fingers. Faces peeked from the rows, half-formed, stretched like dough, mouthless and watching. He screamed, and the sound was swallowed by the stalks. Somehow he reached the edge of the field, tearing through dry rows until the barn loomed in front of him. He burst through its doors and slammed them behind him, panting, hands shaking so violently he could barely hold the latch shut. Silence. Then a single dull thump from outside the barn wall. A moment later, another, and another. Slow, heavy. Something was circling the barn. By morning, it was gone. No tracks, no signs, just the same creaking rope swinging in the rafters and the faint scent of rot. Elliot made coffee with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. His eyes were sunken, the stubble on his face gone gray overnight. He tried to write it off. Exhaustion, delirium, stress. But every instinct in his body screamed that what he saw was real. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the journal. The words blurred. The ink seemed to crawl on the page. New writing had appeared. A fresh page, previously blank, now read, "You saw. You must feed. Or be fed." And below that, midnight. One must swing. He tried to leave. He got as far as the county highway before the engine died. Just stopped. His phone wouldn't turn on. The air around the truck grew thick, syrupy, buzzing, like heat shimmer but freezing cold. From the tree line on either side, dark shapes moved. He turned back. The road behind him was gone. In its place, a cornfield, where there hadn't been one yesterday, where there shouldn't be one at all. He backed away, breath fogging in the suddenly frigid air, and ran. He spent the day trying to understand. He read every page of the journal, every line, the symbols, the sketches. Pattern began to emerge. Every 40 years, always in late October, the harvest man marks the seer, a cycle, one that begins with sight, followed by haunting, and ends in sacrifice. It had happened in 1933, 1893, 1853. Each time someone went missing from the farm, a traveler, a relative, a child. And each time the crops flourished afterward unnaturally. The final passage from 1953 read, "I saw him. He was beautiful, towering, like a god made of bone and stalk. I tried not to look, but he wanted me to. The rake is ready. The noose swings. The wheel turns again." Elliot set the book down and stared at the barn. Inside, the rope creaked. Always the same rhythm. Always the same beat. Swing. Pause. Swing. Pause. He approached. The barn interior was different now. There were symbols on the walls charred into the wood. Circles and triangles. Wheat carved into skulls. Eyes crossed out. And in the center, a wooden chair. Someone sat in it. His breath caught. It was him. But not him. Not exactly. The figure was hunched, skin pale and waxy, hands folded in its lap. The face was slack. The eyes were sewn shut. Then it raised its head and spoke in his voice. "The field must eat." He ran. Back to the house, into the basement, through the nails. He tore the boards off with splinters stabbing his palms and stumbled into the darkness below. The smell was overpowering. Not just decay. Ritual. Beneath the house was a chamber. Earth-packed walls. Candles. A crude altar of bones. And dozens of old Polaroids pinned to a beam, each showing a person hanging from the barn's rafters. Some were recent. One was a photo of him, taken from behind, at night, standing at the edge of the corn. His heart froze. Someone was in the house. Elliot fled into the woods behind the farm, running blindly. He ran until his legs failed, collapsing beside an old fence post and sobbing. And then, a voice, gentler this time, feminine. "It's not too late." He looked up. A woman stood before him, pale skin, long black hair braided with dry wheat. Her eyes were golden, like autumn leaves. She knelt beside him. "The land wants balance. You saw too soon, but you can still end it." "How?" he rasped. "Offer blood, or offer self. One must swing. The wheel turns again." He blinked, and she was gone. In her place, a bundle of wheat tied with red thread. Inside, a single old key. The barn. Elliot returned as night fell. The barn was quiet. Inside, he climbed the rafters with the key and unlocked the hidden trapdoor in the loft. Below was a pit dug deep into the earth, filled with bones. The rope noose swung beside it. The key fit a small box nailed to the beam. Inside, a curved sickle, handle wrapped in twine, blade rusted, stained. "Feed the land," the journal had said, "or become the feed." He looked to the field. The corn had grown taller, black against the horizon. Shapes moved among the stalks. It was time. Elliot stood beneath the swinging noose, the sickle in his trembling hands. The barn groaned around him, whispering in the windless dark. The air felt pressurized, like standing in the eye of a storm, utterly silent, yet full of unbearable tension. His breath plumed in the cold. His reflection stared back at him from the polished edge of the sickle. A gaunt, frightened man, hollow-eyed and hunted. He whispered to the shadows, to the thing he knew was listening. "If I do this, will it stop?" No answer. But the rope stopped swinging. For the first time in days, it hung still, waiting, The first choice he made was the only one he could live with. He went into the field and set fire to it. The dry stalks caught quickly. Flames licked upward into the night, turning the rows into a sea of crackling gold and black smoke. The fire blazed toward the horizon, but the darkness beyond did not retreat. Instead, it seemed to watch. He thought he heard screaming, but not from the fire. From beneath it, within it, as if the field itself were alive and dying. And then it rained. Not water, not ash, teeth. Hundreds of tiny, rotted teeth fell from the sky, pattering onto the earth like hail. Baby teeth, animal teeth, human molars. He ran again. Back in the barn, the noose now swung violently. The wind had returned, howling through the broken slats like a siren. The sickle glowed faintly in the dark, pulsing like a heartbeat. He thought of what the woman in the woods had said. Offer blood or offer self? His mind raced. Could he offer something else? Was there another way? He turned to the journal, flipping through its pages desperately. One passage stood out now, bold and burned into the parchment. If the seer refuses the rake, he must give the blood of the marked. Another who saw, another who knew. Or the seer himself must swing, and the harvest man will rest. Elliot's blood ran cold. Who else had seen? Who else knew? Mrs. Clay. Took him an hour to drive back to town. The roads had returned, as if the farm had allowed it. The radio was dead.
No lights anywhere.
Stilling Fork looked deserted. The library was open. Inside, Mrs. Clay sat behind the desk like she'd been waiting. "You've seen too much," she said simply, standing. He opened his mouth to speak, but she raised a finger. "I've seen him too. Long ago. 1953. I was 9. My father took me into the field when it was time. Said I had to watch. I didn't understand what I saw, but it marked me anyway." Tears glistened in her ancient eyes. "I've waited all my life for the wheel to turn again. I stayed close. Read the signs. Knew you would come." He didn't want to ask, but he did. "Will it stop? If?" She nodded. "I am marked, just like you. But I'm old. Ready. He only takes those who see. And we've both looked." She stepped around the desk and handed him a folded handkerchief. Inside, a yellowed photograph of her younger self, standing in a field, eyes wide. Behind her, half-shadowed in the corn, a figure, the harvest man. "I saw him when no one believed me," she whispered. "But now someone does. That's enough." He begged her not to, pleaded, but she only smiled, kissed his cheek, and walked out into the night. Back at the barn, just before midnight, the rope hung still once again. Mrs. Clay climbed the ladder without assistance, not even flinching when she saw the pit of bones. "It has to end," she said. He nodded. The wind howled once, sharp and final. She stepped off the beam, and the barn went still. The next morning the air was clean, clear, no wind.
No whispers.
The cornfield had burned to ash. No black stalks remained.
No twisted faces.
Elliot buried what remained of Mrs. Clay beneath the old willow on the hill, beside a marker that simply read, "She saw." He stayed another month. Then another. The barn was empty. The rope was gone. The journal wouldn't open anymore. Its pages fused together. The leather burned smooth. But the land healed. The soil grew rich. The birds returned. Deer grazed in the field where fire had once raged. And yet, sometimes, just before sleep, he swore he heard it. Creak, swing, pause, swing, pause. On the last day of autumn, he packed up the truck to leave for good. As he pulled away, he glanced in the rearview mirror. The cornfield was green again, and at its edge stood a single scarecrow. His face was pale, his mouth sewn shut, and his eyes were open, watching. They told Marion not to come back. "Sell the place," her aunt had said bluntly on the phone. "Burn it if you have to, but don't set foot in that house again." Marianne had laughed. Nervously, sure, but laughed nonetheless. It was just a house. Her grandparents' house, tucked into a forgotten curve of Allegheny County, nestled between overgrown hills and stone-laced pastureland. Old, yes. Isolated, certainly. But not cursed. Right? She arrived in late March, her car rattling over gravel roads barely held together by years of disrepair and thawing frost. Trees still stood bare. The sky hung low and heavy with the sort of slate gray that never seemed to break in Pennsylvania springs. The house stood at the bottom of a shallow hollow, its roof bowed like an old man's back. 2 stories of weather-beaten clapboard, every window blind with curtains drawn. The porch sagged in the center like a mouth mid-scream. Still, Marianne smiled. This was where her mother had grown up, where her grandparents had lived and died. The deed was in her name now. A fresh start, maybe, or at least a place to retreat after a painful breakup and a colder winter. She turned off the engine and stepped into the quiet. The air had a taste to it, like cold rust, like dirt. Inside, the house was exactly as she remembered from childhood. Faded wallpaper, doilies, the faint smell of lavender and mildew. Time had thickened the air. Dust lingered even after she opened the windows. In the kitchen, a note had been left, likely by her aunt. Do not open the cellar. Don't disturb what's beneath. Burn this letter. Forget this place. There was no signature, no greeting. Marianne scoffed and crumpled the paper. Her aunt had always been a little dramatic. But the cellar, the root cellar, as her grandmother called it, did linger in her thoughts. Always locked. Always cold. Even in summer. When she was a girl, her grandfather used to say it was where they kept the old roots, which made her imagine gnarled, hand-like vegetables reaching through the dirt. She'd never seen inside. Not once. And now, she had the key. The first few days passed quietly. She cleaned, swept, sorted through old trunks of family keepsakes. Her mother's wedding dress, still perfectly preserved. A stack of black and white photographs from the 1930s. Her grandmother's recipes, all neatly labeled in looping cursive. But the nights were different. The house didn't sleep. Marianne would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling as the wind scratched against the windows, and the floorboards creaked in long, slow groans, like someone was pacing. Occasionally, she heard what she could only describe as a heartbeat, slow and deep, muffled like it came from the very walls. And once, just once, she woke to the sound of someone knocking gently on the floor beneath her bed. On the 4th day, the cellar key disappeared. She had left it in the silver dish by the door, but now it was gone. She searched the entire house, pulled cushions, opened drawers, even dug through the trash. Nothing. It wasn't until that night, while brushing her teeth, that she saw it. The bathroom mirror had fogged with steam, and 3 words had appeared in the condensation, as if written from behind the glass. Roots are hungry. She dropped the toothbrush. The faucet hissed. Something, some pressure, rose in the floorboards beneath her bare feet, like a breath being drawn in by the house itself. She left the bathroom in a rush and didn't sleep that night. The next morning, she found the key, placed neatly on her pillow, and it was warm. She resisted for 2 more days, but the cellar called to her. Every time she passed the narrow door under the stairs, her head swam, a vibration in her teeth, a whisper, too faint to parse, rustling like wind through dry leaves. Her dreams became full of dirt and wooden steps and cold stone walls slick with moss. Hands reached from the floor in her sleep. One looked just like hers. Finally, on the 7th night, she gave in. She stood before the cellar door, the key in her hand. The silence around her was deep. Even the trees outside had gone still. She unlocked the door. It opened slowly, revealing a narrow stairwell descending into pitch. The smell hit her immediately. Damp, earthy, metallic, like wet soil mixed with something older. She turned on the flashlight and stepped inside. The root cellar was not what she expected. The stairs led down about 10 feet before opening into a wide chamber, older than the house itself. The walls were packed dirt and stone, and along them, shelves held glass jars filled with preserved vegetables and things she couldn't identify. Gray matter, long, curled objects that resembled bones. In the center of the room stood a wooden platform. On it, a stone basin, stained, cracked, and all around the floor, carved into the dirt, were symbols, old, worn, but still pulsing faintly with heat. She felt it in her spine, in her stomach, in her teeth. This is not a place for food. This was a shrine. She turned to leave, and saw a figure at the top of the stairs, pale, tall, as like hollows. It stared down at her, unmoving. Marian screamed, the flashlight flickering in her trembling hand. When she looked again, it was gone, but a whisper remained. From all around her, from beneath her, "Welcome back." The whisper trailed off, echoing in her bones long after it stopped echoing in the cellar. Marian stood frozen, flashlight trembling in her hand. The dirt beneath her feet no longer felt solid. It felt like it was breathing. She backed toward the stairs, careful not to step into the carved symbols. The closer she got to the steps, the heavier the air became, like trying to move through water. Her skin itched, her ears rang, and her vision dimmed around the edges. Then, something moved beneath the floor. Just a ripple, like something large had shifted far below the surface. She ran. Up the stairs, out of the cellar, slamming the door behind her, twisting the key in the lock. She shoved a chair against the handle for good measure, heart hammering in her throat. She collapsed on the floor of the hallway, shivering. She had seen something, a shape, at the top of the stairs. Her flashlight had caught it for only a second, but that second was enough. It was wearing her grandfather's coat. The next morning, she tried to rationalize. Old cellars were creepy. Jars with strange food, underground cold, all normal. Maybe she'd seen a shadow, not a figure. Maybe the flashlight had caught a coat hanging from a peg. She tried to leave it at that. But as she made breakfast, the eggs on her plate began to bleed. Not yolk, blood. Thick, dark, and warm. She screamed, dropped the plate. When she looked again, normal. Eggs, untouched. No blood, no cracks on the plate. But the sound of breathing still hung in the kitchen. She checked the cellar door. The chair she'd propped against it was gone. So was the key. That night, the dreams returned, worse than ever. She stood in the cellar, surrounded by her family. All of them. Her mother, grandparents, aunts, uncles. All gray and still, like wax statues with hollow eyes. They stood in a circle around the basin. Each held something. Her mother held a small bone. Her grandfather a knife. And her grandmother a bundle of hair freshly cut. They all turned to look at her, and then spoke in unison. Feed what sleeps beneath, or be fed to it. She woke screaming, a chill in the room, and at the foot of the bed, footprints. Bare, wet, made from mud and bits of pale root. They trailed in from the hallway, stopped by her bed, and disappeared. She checked the cellar. Still locked, still cold, but the symbols were glowing now. Faint, pulsing, almost like veins under skin. In desperation, Marian called her aunt. When the phone picked up, there was no hello, just her aunt's trembling voice. "You opened it, didn't you?" Marian tried to explain, tried to ask for help, but her aunt only spoke over her. "You should have burned it. You should have let the past rot. Now it's awake." "What's awake?" Marian cried. "What is it?" Silence. Then her aunt whispered, "The family's sin," and hung up. The next morning, Marianne's phone wouldn't turn on. The power in the house died. The wind picked up outside, carrying a smell of soil and rot. Something had changed. The roots had surfaced. She stepped onto the porch and saw them. Pale tendrils curling up from the ground like veins bursting through skin. They writhed slightly, as if tasting the air. All across the yard, from the well to the tree line, they stretched. Some coiled around the fence posts, some dug back into the earth. And in the very center of the yard, a new mound of dirt had risen. She approached it slowly, heart pounding. Set in the mound was a child's shoe. She turned it over. Inside, a human tooth. Small, still bloody. By nightfall, the cellar was whispering again. Louder now, clearer. She pressed her ear to the door. We fed it. We sealed it. But blood calls to blood. You are the last. She backed away, trembling, whispering over and over, "This isn't real. This isn't real." But the floor beneath her grew warm, and from the baseboards, tiny roots began to creep into the house. Marian searched the attic. Old trunks, photo albums, anything to explain what was happening. She found it behind a false wall, a journal wrapped in waxed canvas, sealed with red thread. It belonged to her great-grandfather. Inside were entries in neat, nervous script. It lives in the earth. The settlers fed it for years. Blood, hair, bone. Anything to keep the land fertile. My father tried to stop the rites. The crops failed. Children vanished. My sister was taken. I saw what it did to her body when it spat her back out. They said it was the price for peace. We stopped feeding it in 29. Buried the altar. Prayed it would sleep forever. But it's in our blood, and it wants its lineage back. The final page read, "The last child will awaken it. If she opens the door, God help her." That night, Marian lit every candle she could find and waited in the kitchen with a carving knife and the journal in her lap. Outside, the wind was howling. Trees bowed low. Dirt rattled against the windows like hail. And beneath it all, the sound of something massive shifting under the house, like stone being scraped by bone. Then footsteps from the cellar. Slow. Vite. There. The footsteps reached the top of the cellar stairs and stopped. For a long time there was silence. Marian sat frozen at the kitchen table, knife in one hand, candlelight dancing against her pale knuckles. The air was so still, so tightly coiled, that every breath felt like an offense. Then came the creaking. Not the door, the walls. Wood groaned. Floorboards swelled and buckled slightly beneath her feet. The very bones of the house were shifting, as if stretching after a long, fitful sleep. And just when she couldn't bear another second, the cellar door burst open. The chair she'd barricaded against it was flung across the hallway with impossible force. It hit the wall, splintered in half, and thudded to the floor. The darkness beyond the door pulsed like it was alive. And from it something rose. Not a man. Not even a ghost. A shape vaguely human but wrong, stitched together from root and ashen bone. Hollow eyes leaking soil. Hands long and wooden. Fingers tapering into barbed tendrils. It stepped into the hall with the wet thump of rotting wood on tile. And behind it, whispers. So many voices, layered like a chorus of drowning lungs. Blood and bone, flesh and seed. Feed us. Bury her. Let the roots drink. Marian ran. She fled into the living room, kicked aside furniture, and sprinted up the stairs 2 at a time. Behind her, the floor cracked. The thing followed, slow, relentless, dragging itself with impossible grace. As she reached the second floor, the walls began to bleed. Not paint. Blood. Thick, dark rivulets running from the corners, oozing from beneath the wallpaper, dripping from the ceiling with a scent like rusted knives and forgotten graves. And from the mirror at the end of the hall, she saw herself. Not her now, but her as a child. Dressed in overalls, covered in dirt, and smiling. Behind the reflection child, the creature stood. It reached for her. She screamed. The mirror shattered. She barricaded herself in the master bedroom, panting, sliding a dresser across the door. The whispers outside grew louder, voices of her family. Her mother, her grandmother, her aunt. All speaking with the same voice. We hid it, but you brought it back. We buried it, but you opened the gate. You are the last root. You must feed the seed. You must feed yourself. The floorboards beneath her trembled. A lump formed under the carpet, crawling, moving. She tore the rug aside and found a hand reaching up through the floor. It was hers, gray, desiccated, fingernails long and black. The ring she wore, unmistakable. She screamed and scrambled backward. The hand withered away before her eyes. She flipped through the journal again, desperate for any escape. There, hidden in a fold of the back cover, she found a map. A hand-drawn diagram of the cellar, with a second chamber marked beneath the main one. Sever the seed. Cleanse the altar with fire and blood. Do not let it reach the surface. It was a ritual, or at least part of one. The final line read, "Only the last bloodline can seal it." With fire, with sacrifice. She knew what she had to do. She took the knife, a can of gasoline from the shed, matches, and the journal. The house moaned around her, like a beast protesting the steps of its surgeon. She crept back downstairs. The hall was soaked in blood. Roots hung from the ceiling like veins. The cellar door waited open, and from the depths, chanting, dozens of voices, all familiar, all family. The descent felt longer this time. Steps stretched, shadows curled. The light of her flashlight flickered and dimmed. At the bottom, the basin still stood. But now it was full of blood, of root, of writhing flesh that formed vague faces, all screaming silently. The floor beyond it had split open. A chasm stretched downward, filled with a pulsing mass of roots, wrapped around something huge and sleeping. She understood then. The family's crops hadn't thrived for generations by chance. They had fed this thing. Fed it with stillborns, with secrets, with strangers who had gone missing. The cellar was never for food. It was a womb, and she was its last child. The creature rose slowly from the pit. Its mouth was wide, too wide, stretched from shoulder to shoulder, filled with teeth made of bone and root. No eyes, only sockets that seemed to suck in the light. It reached for her, whispering, "Daughter, return, become root, feed the earth." But she had brought fire. She poured the gasoline across the floor into the basin over the altar.
Lia match.
"No," she whispered. "No more." The fire caught fast. Flames raced in spirals across the carvings. The roots screamed. An actual sound, high and desperate and filled with rage. The ground buckled. The creature lunged. But Marian sliced her palm with the knife and let her blood fall into the basin. A burst of light. The fire flared, white-hot. The creature shrieked. The roots burned, and then collapsed. The next morning, the townsfolk saw the smoke. The old house in the hollow was gone. Scorched stone, but no remains. Only a single patch of land, green and vibrant, as if life had returned to it. At the center, an old stone basin stood, cracked in half, and carved beside it in fresh earth, as if written by hand. Last root. Finally cut. The fire should have killed her. That's what Marian told herself in the fading haze of consciousness. But when she awoke, she was not dead. Not quite alive either. She was lying in the field, on scorched earth that pulsed faintly with heat and life. All around her, the grass had begun to grow green again. Birds sang above her. The air had the faint scent of rain. The house was gone. Completely. No chimney. No foundation. Not even rubble. Only the cellar door remained. Standing upright in the middle of the field, unattached to anything, casting no shadow. It had burned, and yet it remained. She rose slowly. Her palm was still bleeding, the ritual wound dark and clean. The pain was distant, like it belonged to someone else. She staggered forward, toward the door. It opened. There were no stairs now, only roots stretching down into blackness. She turned away, and began to walk. 2 months later, Marianne was living in a small apartment above a hardware store in a different county. The events of the cellar had buried themselves under layers of distraction, denial, and therapy. She told no one. She told herself it had all been trauma. hallucination, gas leak, family madness, folklore embedded in her psyche since childhood. But the scar on her palm still ached when it rained. And sometimes, in her dreams, she was still in the cellar, standing before the basin, hearing that deep-rooted voice whisper her name like a prayer. Marianne, marrow, earth, seed. And sometimes, she woke with soil under her fingernails. Then the letters began. They arrived in plain envelopes, no return address, typed on yellowed paper, each signed with a single letter, G. The first read, "You stopped the hunger. For now. But it is not dead. Only dreaming." The second, "You are the last root, but others have sprouted. The land remembers." The third, "They are digging again." She ignored them at first, until she saw the news. A construction crew in the next county over had broken ground for a new housing development. 2 workers had gone missing. The others reported hearing chanting from beneath the topsoil. And then the bones were found. Hundreds of them, small, twisted, buried in perfect rows like crops. The story vanished from the papers after a week. But she knew. The roots were spreading. Marianne made a decision. She drove back to the property, or where it had once been. The field had grown wild again. Birds avoided it. Deer wouldn't cross it. The cellar door still stood, perfectly intact. This time there was a note nailed to it, written in fresh blood. Seedling found. Beneath it, pinned with a rusted nail, was a photograph. A child, no older than 7. Pale hair, familiar eyes. Hers. She didn't have a child. Did she? Back in her apartment, she tore apart her belongings. Old photo albums, yearbooks, journals. And there, slipped inside a blank envelope in the back of a closet, was a birth certificate. Her name on it. Mother Marianne Lornchild. Ash Lorne. She dropped it, chest tight. She had a child, or had had one. But she couldn't remember. Only fragments. A scream in a hospital hallway. A small hand gripping hers. The smell of earth. The sound of something saying, "The child will continue. If you forget, it grows stronger." She called her aunt again. No answer. Then a man answered. Quiet voice. Tired. "She's gone." Took the fire to herself. Wrote something on the wall before she went. "It's not dead. It's only waiting." He hung up. Marianne looked in the mirror. The reflection stared back with new eyes. Not older. Not tired. Different. And in the background, just behind her shoulder, the cellar door standing in her bathroom where it had no place being. She turned. Nothing there. But the floor tiles were damp. And a single, thin root curled its way out of the sink drain. She packed that night. Not to run. To hunt. To find the others. Whoever had disturbed the soil. Whoever had unearthed its pieces. Because she understood now, you don't destroy it. You contain it. You bury it again. And again. And you pray the roots don't remember your name. In her dream that night, she stood in an endless field. The wind moved backward, and the trees were growing in reverse. At her feet, something pushed up from the earth. A hand, small,
Familiar.
and a voice spoke from beneath the soil, speaking her name with something like pride. "Mother!" Marianne woke with dirt in her bed. Dark soil clung to her sheets, her hands, her arms. Her fingernails were packed with it. Her bare feet were cold and wet with dew. She was in her apartment, but something had followed her home. The drain in the bathroom now leaked tiny filaments of root. The kitchen faucet wheezed before releasing water that smelled faintly like blood and moss. And at night, beneath the hum of the fridge and the whir of the heater, she heard it. "Come down, child. There's more beneath you than above." She left work without giving notice. Started driving between small towns and forgotten roads, following stories. Murmurs. Disappearances that didn't make the news. Families whose children had begun speaking in ancient tongues. Fields where nothing grew or grew too fast. In Harrisville, she found a girl who said her grandfather talked to something through the storm drain. In Dairy Run, she spoke to a woman who dreamed of tree roots strangling her baby monitor cord. In Barlow Ridge, she found a barn where the cows had all lain down on the same night, facing the same direction, toward a half-dug hole in the earth. They had all been told the same thing: feed it, or be fed. The roots were not gone. They had simply gone underground, waiting, spreading, reaching through time and blood and memory. What her family had done for generations. The rituals, the blessings. They had merely been containment, bribes, and Marianne, by surviving, had become something else. The last gardener. Not of crops, of memory, of burial, of silence. One morning, she woke to find a folded note beside her bed. It was written on old parchment, the same brittle kind her grandfather had used. It read, "We found another cellar, in Kansas. It's older than yours, and it's waking up."
No signature.
Just a symbol burned into the corner of the page. Seedling the seedling. Marian made her choice. She burned the journal, burned the house. They always said the orchard was planted in blood. Not metaphorically, not poetically, literally, blood-soaked dirt, dug with bare hands by someone long dead but never gone. It was the kind of local legend that got whispered in hardware stores and passed around campfires. Don't go near the third row after dark. Don't touch the iron thing hanging in the old shed. If you hear the wind in the branches when there is no wind, don't turn around. But Samuel Dorsey didn't believe in any of that. Not when he inherited the land. Not when he walked its rows alone. And not even when the apples started to bleed. He was 33 when his father died. Old Charlie Dorsey, orchard man, hermit, and suspected alcoholic, was found hanging from the rafters of the barn. His body already bloated, the rope frayed and damp, flies thick around his swollen tongue. No note.
No footprints.
Nothing stolen. Just a small, blood-stained scythe left lying beneath him. It was old, ornate, hand-carved with swirling shapes and faded runes. The blade was blackened with age, but its edge gleamed like fresh glass. Samuel, practical as they came, figured it was some antique his father had been too proud to sell. He stored it in the tool shed. That was his first mistake. The orchard was huge. Almost 60 acres of carefully cultivated apple trees, stretching in perfect rows down a slow hill. The farmhouse stood at the top, worn and warped, its windows always seeming too dark for the hour. Samuel moved in alone. He had no wife, no children, no siblings to inherit alongside him. That first week, he walked the rows, noting the late summer swell of fruit. Red and gold, some already plump and ripe. He thought, maybe I can make this place work. Maybe Dad wasn't crazy after all. Then, on the 8th morning, he found the apple tree bleeding. It wasn't sap. He'd grown up here. He knew the color of sap, the smell. What dripped from the bark of the oldest tree in the third row was not amber. It was dark red, thick, metallic, blood. It leaked from a horizontal slit in the bark, too clean to be natural. Like a wound. He thought, a prank. Kids, maybe. Locals screwing with him. So he took a knife, cut away a piece of bark, and found flesh beneath. Striated muscle, puckered veins. He vomited on the spot. When he returned the next morning with a camera, it was gone. Just wood. Just bark. No blood.
No wound.
But on the ground, under a pile of leaves, he found something sharp and iron. A finger bone. That night, the wind howled through the orchard, but there was no breeze. The trees shifted anyway, their branches groaning. He stood on the porch and watched them move, a synchronized rhythmic twitching, as if something deep in the soil was breathing. At 3:13 a.m., he woke from a dead sleep, sweating, his chest tight. He thought he'd heard someone screaming his name in the orchard. But when he looked out the window, all he saw was the silhouette of a man standing beneath the third tree in the third row. A man holding a scythe. The next morning, There were claw marks on the farmhouse door. Long, deep,
Pagalil.
like something massive had tried to get in. He checked the tool shed. The antique scythe was gone. He walked the property line for hours. Nothing. No signs of break-in.
No trespassers.
But as he circled back toward the southern edge of the orchard, the oldest part, he noticed something wrong with the trees. Their bark was peeling in thin strips, and each strip was covered in names. Dozens of them, burned in, layered over each other. Some recent, some nearly vanished. He found his own name, burned faintly into a branch, written sideways, fresh, Samuel Dorsey, and next to it, another line, burned deeper. Seed to reap. He ran back to the house. That night the dreams came. He stood in the orchard, surrounded by apple trees that bled from the trunks. The fruit pulsed on the branches like beating hearts. From the shadows, figures stepped out. All of them held scythes. All of them were family. His father, his grandfather, his great-grandmother, aunts, uncles, cousins, stretching back generations. They circled him and began to chant. Reap the rows. Feed the land. The scythe is yours. Take the hand. Then one stepped forward, his father, face half-rotted. Charlie Dorsey lifted his scythe and whispered, "It's your turn, boy," and swung. Samuel woke screaming. There was mud in his bed.
Wet soil.
Apple seeds. Tiny white roots sprouting from the pillowcase. And on the inside of his palm, a faint burn in the shape of a curved blade. The mark on Samuel's palm didn't fade. By the next morning, it had darkened, turning red, then scabbing over like a brand. A half-moon of rough, blistered skin. He soaked it in cold water, wrapped it in gauze, tried not to think of the dream. But the dream wouldn't let him go. It returned every night. The same dream, deeper each time. More figures in the orchard. More blood in the branches. The chanting louder. More familiar voices. And always at the center the old scythe, hanging in midair, waiting. By the end of the second week, the apples had started to rot early. Samuel found whole branches of fruit turned black, hanging like bloated tumors. The insides were filled not with mush, but teeth. Small human teeth. He burned them, but the next morning the trees were full again. More fruit. More eyes where stems should be. The orchard was growing things it shouldn't. He tried to find records. He drove to the county archive in Omak and requested deeds, blueprints, anything about the land's history. The clerk raised an eyebrow. "That orchard," he said. "You mean the old Dorsey patch?" "Yes," Samuel said. "My father's place. Now mine." The clerk paused, frowning. "You know it used to be a graveyard, right?" Samuel felt his stomach lurch. The man continued. "Native burial ground, long before the settlers came through. Then cholera victims in the 1800s. They moved most of the headstones, but they didn't move the bodies." Samuel left with a manila envelope of old surveys and building permits. Inside one, in the margins of a soil analysis, someone had written in faded pencil, "Soil too rich, rot comes too quick, apples full of mouths." That night, the scythe came home. He found it waiting on the kitchen table, blade up, crusted in fresh dirt and what looked like hair. He didn't remember bringing it inside. But the mark on his hand burned like it was touching fire. He tried to toss it outside, but his arm locked up. His hand would not release it. He watched in horror as his own fingers tightened around the handle, unwilling, as if answering a call that had never been spoken aloud. From outside, he heard a low rustling. Not the wind. The trees were moving again. They were coming for him. He locked the doors, nailed the windows, took the scythe to the shed and buried it beneath a concrete slab, poured kerosene around the perimeter and lit a perimeter fire. That night he didn't sleep. Instead, he sat on the porch with a shotgun across his lap and stared at the orchard. At 2:04 a.m., a figure walked out from between the trees. It moved with jerks, like a puppet strung on sinew. limbs long and loose, jaw slack, head tilted. It was his Uncle Clay, dead since 1959, burned in a tractor fire. But here he was, walking, holding a scythe, and grinning. Samuel fired. The blast hit the figure directly, stumbled, dropped the scythe but didn't fall. Instead, it laughed. A wet, gurgling sound, like air through rotten lungs, and turned back into the trees. The scythe remained, glinting in the moonlight. Samuel retrieved it at dawn, hands shaking. He tried to break it, set it on the chopping block, swung the axe, but the blade didn't even scratch. The axe split instead. The next day, a man from the orchard co-op came to check in on the upcoming harvest. He walked the fields alone while Samuel brewed coffee. When Samuel returned, he found the man standing at the third tree, completely still. "Hey!" Samuel called. The man didn't respond, just stared. Samuel came closer. The man's eyes were rolled back. His lips were moving, whispering something under his breath. Samuel leaned in. The man said, "Seed to reap, root to rise, let the scythe sing." Then he bit into an apple, one of the black ones, and collapsed, seizing. Blood poured from his ears. Samuel buried the body. He didn't call the cops. What would he say? He didn't even know what was real anymore. That night, the dream changed. He wasn't in the orchard. He was underground. Roots wrapped around his legs like chains. The air was thick and hot, full of the smell of rust and bruised fruit. Before him stood a tree made of people. Limbs and torsos and faces grown into bark, all of them Dorseys. Some he recognized. Some were infants, some ancient. In its center, a heart-shaped cavity. Empty, waiting. The tree whispered, "Bring the scythe, let the root drink. You are the last harvest." He woke with the scythe in his hands. He hadn't gone to sleep holding it. He dropped it, ran to the shed. The concrete slab he'd buried it under was cracked in half, from underneath, and the floor was covered in tiny footprints, child-sized.
Bore.
Dozens of them. Samuel didn't leave the house for 3 days. He boarded every door, every window, ate only what was canned and sealed, slept in bursts, shotgun in one hand, the scythe wrapped in a tarp and nailed to the floor beneath the dining room table. But the orchard did not forget him. The third morning, he opened the refrigerator and found rows of apples inside, stacked neatly where the milk and eggs had been. All of them were bleeding. All of them had teeth. Some were chewing. He slammed the door shut, backed away, and nearly tripped over the scythe, now out of its wrappings, sitting on the kitchen floor, gleaming. There were new notches on the blade. 7. He hadn't carved them. The phone rang once. Just once. He picked it up. Only silence. Then a whisper. "The orchard remembers, Samuel. It fed your family. Now you must feed it." That evening, the walls started to bleed. Same as the apples. Not in streams, but in steady drips, seeping from the nail holes, from the corners, from the keyholes. As if the house was sweating rot. He smelled dirt. Sweet, decaying earth. Like the grave after rain. From the hallway came a scratching. Then a voice. "Hi." Childlike.
Familiar.
"Uncle Sam." He turned slowly. A small girl stood at the end of the hall. Barefoot. Pale. Eyes gray as rotted bark. It was Josie, his cousin's daughter. Drowned at 5. The river had taken her. But here she was, holding a small toy rake, and smiling. Her mouth was full of seeds. He fled the house, ran into the orchard. It was dusk. The rows were long shadows, branches clawing at the sky. As he passed the third row, the air changed. Heavy, charged, like walking through fog made of static. He paused at the oldest tree, the one that bled first. It now had a face, a bulging knot of bark that looked like a man's mouth open in a scream. His father's mouth, lips split, tongue gone. It whispered, "We reap what we sow." And then the tree opened. The bark peeled back, revealing a hollow. Inside he saw bones, stacks of them, infants, children, adults, all arranged like offerings. At the very center, wrapped in roots like swaddling cloth, was a figure, hunched, sleeping. Its arms were folded over a black scythe, twice the size of his own. His chest rose and fell. It was breathing. He backed away, heart jackhammering in his throat, and stepped on a hand. It reached up from the soil, pale, rotten, fingers twitching. Another hand joined it, then another. The ground began to rise. Not collapse, but swell. The orchard was birthing. Samuel ran. Branches clawed at him. Roots tangled his ankles. Leaves slapped his face. Whispered secrets in languages he didn't know but understood anyway. You were chosen. You are the harvest. Let the orchard drink. He burst through the trees and into the old barn, slammed the door, bolted it, and turned to see the rafters strung with ropes, all of them swinging, all of them full. Shadows of Dorsey's past. Men, women, children, eyes glowing, and all of them holding scythes. They began to hum, low, vibrating. The barn shuddered. Dust rained down, and the shadows whispered in unison, "It's your season, Samuel." He lit the barn on fire. Everything, the beams, the hay, the ropes, the floor soaked in gasoline. The flames caught fast. The figures didn't move. They just stared at him, smiling, and the scythe in his hand began to sing, a high, whistling vibration that pierced his teeth and shook his skull. He dropped it into the fire, watched it twist, crack, writhe like a living thing, but the fire did not kill it. The scythe did not burn. Samuel collapsed outside, coughing, crying, face streaked with soot and ash. Behind him, the barn roared. The orchard stood silent, and from its heart, deep beneath the soil, he heard a voice. Not in his ears, in his blood. You cannot burn what has no beginning. You cannot reap what you did not plant. But the scythe remembers. That night he buried it, deep, in the farthest corner of the orchard, under a slab of concrete, encased in salt and chains and prayers. He poured his blood over the soil and whispered the only thing he could think to say, "Let it end with me." He sold the orchard the next week, left the state, changed his name, told no one. But sometimes, late at night, in strange motels along the highway, he would dream of branches growing from his chest, and wake with dirt between his teeth. For almost a year, Samuel ran, changed towns, changed jobs, grew a beard, started calling himself Martin Blake. He never stayed in one place more than 2 weeks, never slept in the same bed twice. He kept to the edge of things. Gas station backlots, roadside motels, truck stops where the light buzzed and the air never felt clean. But the orchard followed. Not in trees, not in dreams alone, in signs. A roadside billboard for cider with his family crest burned into the wood. A crate of apples delivered to a diner in Kansas, one of which split open in his hand, revealing a tiny infant's jawbone inside. A homeless woman in Nevada who pointed at him from across the street and shrieked, "The scythe is still in you." He tried to end it again, this time in an abandoned church in Utah. He carved runes into the pews, soaked the altar in salt, even swallowed a mouthful of ashen bone, just like the old journals said. He set fire to his old clothes, burned every photo, every document. But when he left, there, nailed to the church door, was a single red apple. No message, just a bite already taken, still warm. In early fall, he began to feel pulled. His dreams grew vivid again. The orchard called to him, not in words anymore, but in memory. He could smell the sap, feel the sway of the trees, hear the metal hum of the scythe even in daylight. Then the letter arrived. No stamp, just folded parchment slipped under the door of a rented room in Oregon. On it, "You left the land. The land didn't leave you. Harvest comes due. We've started without you." Attached was a photograph, black and white, faded at the edges. It showed his old orchard. The trees were full of bodies, dozens, hanging by their ankles, scythes planted into their backs like stakes. And in the center of the frame, Samuel himself, standing, smiling. He had no memory of it being taken. So he returned. Not by choice. Not really. He told himself he was going to burn it all, level the land, salt the fields, and finally end it. But in truth, he was going back to find the truth, to understand. He arrived at dusk. The new owners had left. No one had been there in months. The house had collapsed in on itself. The barn was a skeleton of black beams and ash. But the orchard? The orchard was thriving, more vibrant than ever, and bigger, much bigger. As he walked through the rows, the trees seemed to bend slightly toward him, as though acknowledging their farmer. They remembered him. They wanted him. He passed a new row he didn't recognize, each tree bearing fruit not of apples but of faces. His face, his father's, his great-grandfather's, all twisted in agony. Eyes closed, mouths open in mid-scream. He reached the center of the orchard just as night fell. There stood a new tree, a massive, unnatural thing. Its bark slick and black like coal, its limbs tipped in thorns, its trunk split vertically like a mouth, buried half in the roots at its base. The scythe, waiting, calling. He touched it, not because he wanted to, because it wanted to be held. The moment his fingers closed around the handle, everything changed. He was underground again, same as the dream, the root chamber, cathedral of flesh and bark. His family stood around him, dead, all of them, but alive in purpose. Their bodies wrapped in vines, their hands grown into the walls, their mouths filled with black soil. And behind them, from the dark, something immense moved. Not a tree, not a god, something older, something that had watched seeds die and bloom since before names were carved in stone. It leaned in close and whispered in his voice, "You are the scythe now. You are the harvest. Reap the fruit of man." He woke lying at the base of the new tree, scythe in hand. His hand was no longer scarred. The brand had disappeared, but something was inside him now. He felt it in his spine, in the hum of his thoughts, a rhythm. Slice, swing, feed, sleep. As dawn broke, he looked out across the orchard and saw the truth. It had grown across the land, across every ridge and gully. Where once there were trees, now there were rows of silence. Where once there were fences, now there were thorns. And in the far distance, smoke rising from another field. Not his, someone else's. The orchard had spread. Samuel smiled, raised the scythe, and began to walk. Samuel walked for hours. The orchard had no end now. It flowed like a sea across the land. Roots writhing just beneath the surface, trees bent in impossible shapes, fruit that pulsed and whispered. He was no longer hungry, no longer tired. The wind no longer chilled him. He carried the scythe with ease, its weight nothing compared to the weight in his mind, the sense of purpose. He didn't reap for death. He reaped for balance. That's what the voice said. Too many mouths, too much rot. Let the fruit fall. He came to a new house on the edge of the orchard. Unfamiliar, modern, not part of his family land. Inside, a man and woman slept in a warm bed, unaware that the roots had already crept beneath their floor. He stood at the window watching them breathe. His reflection in the glass was wrong. His skin was pale bark. His eyes glowed faintly. The mark on his hand had returned, but it moved, twisted, thorned. The scythe shimmered. He raised it, then stopped. A child's drawing was taped to the wall inside the room. Crayon lines. A sun. A house. 3 stick figures. On the back, written in a child's hand, "Our family grows like trees." Samuel lowered the blade and turned away. The orchard was growing, yes, but he would choose where it fed. He would decide who to reap. He would be the one to prune the roots, not let them run wild. If that meant taking lives, he would do it. If that meant becoming the monster, he'd already crossed the line. Because if the scythe was in him now, then it answered to him. Authorities discovered 17 residents missing from 3 rural communities. Homes abandoned, dinner plates still warm, fields overgrown. Local groves, once dormant, were found unnaturally lush, bearing red fruit in spiraled rows. Each apple had a name carved into it. In one orchard, investigators found a crude shrine built of wood and wire. At its center, a black scythe, wrapped in roots, still warm to the touch. Some say the orchard still moves at night, that the trees grow a few feet closer each week, and that if you hear the wind pass through branches that weren't there yesterday, you should run. Because the one who carries the scythe does not sleep. He walks, and he remembers every name. They say pigs are smarter than dogs, smarter than horses, smart enough, maybe, to learn a man's name if you whisper it sweet enough while you feed him. I didn't believe that kind of talk until the summer my cousin Grady came to stay. We were 11 that year. I lived on a hog farm in Barkley Hollow, Arkansas. Our farm sat at the edge of a swamp that smelled like iron and secrets. We had 92 pigs, 1 old mule, and a root cellar Mama wouldn't let me go near after sundown. Daddy died the year before. Mama took to silence like a second skin. Most days she just stared out the window at the barn, lips moving without sound. The pigs would watch her back. All of them, all at once. Grady was loud, full of vinegar and stories. He said his daddy sent him up from Louisiana, 'cause he kept waking up in the yard chewing on his own shoes. Said he talked to the hog saint in his sleep. Said the hog saint told him the truth about men and beasts. I didn't know what he meant, but I remember the first time I saw it. That pig, the one with the scar above its left eye. The one that watched me too long, and then stood up. It was dusk. The cicadas were buzzing so loud you could feel it in your teeth. Grady and I had snuck into the barn to steal some shine from Mama's locked chest. We were halfway through daring each other to drink when we heard a rustling behind the feed sacks. Then a grunt, followed by a sound I still hear in my sleep sometimes. Not a pig's snort, not a man's cough, something between the two. We turned and saw it, standing, the pig, tall as a man, back hunched, legs trembling like wet wood. Its mouth opened wide, but no sound came out. Then it whispered, "Hoo boy!" Just that, and dropped back to all fours, snorting like nothing happened. We ran. Grady pissed himself halfway to the house. I didn't tell Mama. Grady said she already knew. Said it was her pig. He wouldn't sleep in the house after that. Said he had dreams where the pigs crawled up into the attic and whispered his name through the vents. He started sleeping in the hayloft, and that's when he started changing. At first it was just little things. He stopped brushing his hair, stopped using a fork, started scratching the dirt with his feet, like he was digging something he didn't know he was digging. He began to eat raw, bit into a chicken thigh before Mama could cook it, laughed while the blood ran down his chin, said it tasted just like me. I asked what he meant. He said, "The hog saint showed me. There's pig in man and man in pig. Some lines just ain't straight." Mama tried to send him home, wrote a letter to his daddy, begged him to take Grady back. But no post came to Barkley Hollow. Not anymore. The last mailman drove into town and never came out. Mama said she found his satchel hanging from the old sycamore by the creek. All the letters torn open, except one. One with my name on it. Inside was just a drawing of a pig with my face. Grady got worse. He stopped talking in the daytime, only grunted, snorted. But at night, at night he'd talk in his sleep. We'd hear him from the yard, mumbling up in the hayloft, words we couldn't understand, except for one that came back again and again. Suwine. Mama got real pale when she heard it, told me never to say it, never to think it, said it was a name not meant for our tongues. Said it was what the pigs used before men had words. One morning, the pigs were waiting at the fence. All of them, perfectly still, facing the house, like they were expecting something. Grady didn't come down from the loft. I climbed up to check. He was gone. But something was left behind. Pile of hay shaped like a man. Torn apart, soaked in mud, teeth scattered around like seeds. And in the center, a hoof print, upright. Mama didn't speak for days. When she did, she just said, "It was supposed to be me," and went to the root cellar. I never saw her again. Mama went into the root cellar just before sundown. She carried a sack of feed over her shoulder and the family knife in her belt. The one Daddy used to gut deer and ward off bad wind. I watched her from the porch, watched her open that old cellar door like she was greeting something familiar, something she'd been putting off for years. She didn't even look back. The door creaked shut behind her. It didn't open again.
I waited till morning.
Slept on the porch with the dogs curled up tight against me. They whined all night but never barked, never even looked toward the cellar. When the sun rose, I crept to the door. No sound from within. I called her name once, twice, then I opened it. The steps descended into darkness that didn't feel like just shadow. It felt thick, like water, like it wanted to pour upward and pull me down. And the smell, not rot, not death, something sweet, like fruit gone over, like meat left too long in honey. I called again. Something answered. Not words, just a grunt. Deep.
Vet.
Animal. I ran back into the house, locked the doors, shoved the dresser against the pantry entrance just in case. The pigs were waiting again. Every single one of them lined up at the fence, all watching the cellar door. That day, the barn roof collapsed. Not from rain, not from wind, from weight. Something had crawled onto it. The whole roof buckled, beams snapping like twigs, hay blowing everywhere. I didn't see what caused it, but I heard it. Footsteps, four-legged, but too heavy. Hooves, big as dinner plates, dragging across the tin, slow and deliberate. And a sound like breathing, but wrong, deep and crackling, like lungs full of mud. That night I saw Grady again. He was standing in the garden, under the peach tree, barefoot and naked. Only he wasn't Grady anymore. His spine bent backward, legs turned inward like an animal. His mouth hung open, too wide, and I swear to God, there were tusks coming in. He didn't blink, didn't speak, just rooted in the dirt with his feet. And when I called his name, he snorted, and from the darkness behind him, something massive grunted back. I woke the next morning to find hoof prints all over the porch. Not regular pig prints, upright, and on the door, carved into the wood, a word I couldn't read. I don't know how I knew it was a word, but I did. I tried to copy it into my notebook, but every time I finished the shape, the paper curled and blackened. I tried to burn the carving off the door. The flame wouldn't catch. Instead, the wood bled. I stopped going outside. The pigs began circling the house, always in groups of 3. Morning, noon, night, 3 white, 3 black, 3 pale pink. They never ate, never squealed, just walked and watched. Sometimes, they stood still and shook, like they were trying to hold something in, or maybe keep something out. The third night, I woke to snorting under the floorboards. I pressed my ear to the wooden planks and heard chanting. Not in English, not in anything I knew. It sounded like hooves stomping in time, like grunts layered with whispers. I crawled under the house with a flashlight. Nothing there, but the dirt was freshly turned. And in it, buried up to the neck, was a pig's head. Eyes open, mouth sewn shut. My flashlight flickered, and in the blink between light and dark, the eyes moved. Looking right at me, I stopped sleeping, stopped eating. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Mama's voice calling from the cellar. Sweet, soft, but slow, like something remembering how to speak. And always the same phrase, "Come feed the roots, baby. You got pig in you too." The animals stopped making noise. Birds, bugs, the dogs. Silence spread over the land like oil, and that's when I saw it. The thing in the field. It stood on two legs. Rough skin, pink-gray and stretched too tight. Bristled shoulders, human arms bent the wrong way. A pig's head, but longer, almost like a mask stretched over a skull. It stood next to the watering trough, looked up at me, and smiled. I didn't scream when I saw it. Couldn't. The thing in the field held me with its stare. Not like a predator, but like a man looking into a mirror. It raised one crooked arm and pointed to the root cellar. Then it turned and walked upright into the corn rows. Gone just like that, but it left behind a trail. Hooved prints burned into the dirt like iron fresh off the fire. The grass along its path was wilted, blackened, and curled like it had been boiled alive. That night, the pigs surrounded the house. Not pacing, not staring, waiting. I opened the front door and found them all on their knees, if pigs can kneel, forelegs bent, heads down in a circle around the porch. One of them had a tongue in its mouth. Human, still twitching. Another had eyes blue like Mama's. And the big one, the white boar with the split snout, opened its mouth and spoke. It didn't move its lips. The voice came from its throat, bubbling like soup. "It's time, boy. She's ready for you now." The house began to shake. Floorboards popped. Walls groaned. Dust fell from the rafters. And from under the floor a smell. Rotten apples. Burned sugar. Old blood. And mud. Always the mud. I ran upstairs to grab the family rifle. But when I opened the bedroom door, the floor was gone. The room had no bottom, just a vast pit stretching down into roots. Gnarled, pulsing, wet with sap or blood. I couldn't tell which. At the center, floating above the chasm, was Mama, or what used to be Mama. She was suspended in air by strands of hair and muscle. Eyes rolled back, skin pale, almost translucent. Roots ran in and out of her arms like 4 tubes. Her mouth opened. No sound came out, but my ears bled. I clutched my head, fell to my knees, and in my mind, not my ears, I heard the words, "Pig and man, man and pig, one in the mud, one in the womb. The hollow hog is open. Come be born again." I passed out. I don't know how long I was out. When I came to, I was in the cellar. On my back, naked. The dirt beneath me was warm, soft, breathing. Above me, the ceiling rippled. Not with roots, but veins, bulging and twitching. The air pulsed like lungs inhaling me. And around the room, the pigs stood upright. All of them, every last one. Some still had hooves. Others had fingers. Some wore faces that weren't theirs, stretched, sewn, human. And in the center stood Grady, or what was left of him. He was taller now, thin, covered in bristles and mud. His teeth were too many, his eyes wrong. They looked like they had no back to them, just holes into somewhere else. He stepped forward and spoke in a voice that was part grunt, part child, part monster. "You're the last. After you, we're whole. Mama's ready to birth the boar." I tried to stand. My arms wouldn't move. I looked down. My hands had become hooves. Grady reached into the ground and pulled up the family knife. Held it to my throat. Smiled. "Don't fight. You were meant for this. We were always swine at the soul." And then something snapped. Not inside me. In the house. A beam gave way. The whole foundation collapsed in on the cellar. I don't know how I got out. I remember screaming. I remember the fire. I remember Grady's face vanishing under a wave of falling wood and flame. The pigs scattered, squealing not like animals but like babies. And Mama, I think I saw her vanish into the dirt. I woke in the swamp, naked, shaking, covered in soot. The farm was gone, ashes, but the land was too clean, like it had never been there at all. A week passed before I could speak again. A month before I stopped dreaming of hooves behind doors. I never went back, but I hear things, stories. People near Barkley Hollow whisper about screaming pigs that walk on 2 legs. Some say they saw a boy, maybe 12, with hands like trotters, weeping in the middle of the road. Others say the root cellar never stopped breathing, that it's growing, waiting to birth again. And me? Sometimes, when it rains just right, I catch my reflection in the mud and see a snout. I tried to live like other folks after I fled Barkley Hollow. Took a job washing trucks outside Jonesboro. Slept in the back of a storage unit. Ate crackers and canned beans. Stayed away from meat. But the dreams kept coming. Grady, or the thing that wore his skin. Stood at the edge of my sleep, arms open, mouth stretched wide like a smile was something learned, not natural. He never moved. He just watched. And behind him, in every dream, the pigs stood on 2 legs, still waiting. Sometimes their bellies moved like something inside was still trying to get out. I started seeing things in waking life too. Reflections that didn't match me. A man with a sloped head and cracked hooves standing where I should be. At night, I'd wake with my feet caked in mud. Sometimes there'd be pig tracks on the floor, circling the bed. But the worst thing was the hunger. Started small. Cravings for raw meat. A desire to chew bone. Then it grew into something I couldn't name. Like I was missing a part of myself only found in the dirt. I found a preacher outside Little Rock who claimed to know things. Said he'd cast out the devil from a man once who spoke in the root tongue, the secret language of things buried and never meant to rise. I told him my story. Told him about Mama, the cellar, the pigs. He didn't laugh. He only nodded, quiet and pale. Then he said, "You didn't escape. You just ain't been eaten yet." He tried to bless me. The cross burned my skin. Not like fire, like acid. He screamed and ran. That's when I knew the truth. I was part of it now. Not possessed. Not haunted. Transformed. A man-shaped root. A walking hunger. I stopped fighting it. Started wandering. In Mississippi, I slept under a bridge and dreamt of birthing hooves. In Alabama, I passed a farm and the pigs stopped mid-feeding to watch me with knowing eyes. In Georgia, I followed a sound into a pine grove and found a hole in the ground. Breathing slow and low, a voice rose up from it. "Suwine, Suwine, bring back the marrow. Bring back the mud." I almost climbed in. I don't remember every place I went, but I do remember this. Somewhere, in the ruins of a shack behind an old church, I found a book, leather-bound, wet to the touch, written in mud, blood, and something thicker. Told a story older than Christ, of the hollow hog, a godless god, born from soil, crowned with tusks, who walked upright before man learned speech. Said it lived beneath farms. Said it needed names. Said it grows when we forget. And now I forget more every day. Sometimes I wake and can't recall my own. Sometimes I catch myself chewing through bone just to get to the marrow. Sometimes I feel my knees wanting to bend the wrong way. Sometimes I hear Grady's voice from under my skin. The house didn't look like a place where people had died. It had red shutters, a fresh coat of white paint, neatly trimmed hedges, the kind of home you'd see on a postcard from a town where no one locked their doors. But behind the house stood the butcher's shed, and behind the butcher's shed stood the window, hung low on the back wall, framed in old iron, impossible to open and even harder to ignore. There was no glass, no screen, just an empty, black square that always looked darker than the night around it. And according to his grandfather, that was where the meat watched back. Lewis came to the farm after the war. He was 25, quiet, shell-shocked, the kind of man who stood with his hands in his pockets even when there was work to be done. His grandfather, Claude Mailer, owned the property, had for nearly 40 years. Cattle, pigs, chickens, and meat, always meat. Lewis was just looking for a place to breathe. Claude didn't talk much, but the first night Lewis slept in the upstairs bedroom, he left a note on the dresser, scrawled in grease pencil. "If you hear something scratching at the butcher's window, don't answer it, not even if it knows your name." The first week was uneventful. Mornings spent feeding the pigs, afternoons in the cool shade of the smokehouse. The air always smelled faintly of copper and cedar, the scent of smoked meat and hidden rot. Louis avoided the butcher's shed. Even though Claude had stopped working in it, it still felt occupied. One night, Louis passed it on the way to the well and noticed something strange. The butcher's window had been cleaned, wiped spotless, no grime,
No cobwebs.
like it had just been used. That same night, Louis had his first dream. He stood in front of the window, staring in. He couldn't see inside, only feel something close to the glass, breathing against it. Then a voice whispered from behind the pane, low and wet, "You have his hands now." He woke with the bedsheets tangled around his arms. They were stained red. Claude refused to talk about it. When Louis asked about the window, the old man just stared past him, chewing the inside of his cheek. Finally, he said, "There are rules, son. That window don't take kindly to being watched. It's where he comes through, when the meat's been fed wrong." Louis didn't ask who he was. Not then. The scratching started on the 7th night. Soft at first, just a whisper of nail on wood. Louis heard it while milking the cows at dusk. By the time he reached the shed, it had stopped. But something was hanging from the edge of the window. A strip of skin, small, torn, tattooed. It had a name inked across it, Louis. Claude burned it without a word. But that night, the scratching came again. This time from inside the house. Louis followed the sound to the cellar door, where a trail of meat lay across the floor. Not blood, not guts. Slices, paper-thin cuts of himself. His fingers, his neck, his back, all untouched, but burning. He confronted Claude the next morning, demanded the truth. Claude poured himself a glass of buttermilk, drank half, then finally said, "It ain't a man. It ain't a ghost. It's memory made flesh. Your daddy fed it wrong. I tried to starve it, but it remembered the taste. And now that you're here, it thinks it's me again, and it wants to finish its supper." That night, Louis stayed up with a lantern and his grandfather's old butcher knife. He sat in front of the window, waited. At midnight, the air went cold, and something stepped into the window frame, not through it, into it, like a shadow learning how to wear a man. It had his eyes, and his mouth, but it grinned too wide, and whispered, "You left the door open. Now let me back in." Louis didn't blink, didn't move. The figure in the window grinned wider, as if daring him to speak, to acknowledge it. But he remembered Claude's warning, "Don't answer it, not even if it knows your name." So he gripped the butcher's knife tighter and said nothing. The figure cocked its head. Its neck cracked like tendon pulled too far. It opened its mouth, and from inside came Louis's voice. Not echoed, not mimicked. His exact voice, pitch and breath, from a memory long buried. "Don't let me go, Mama. Please, don't let him cut me again." That memory wasn't real. Was it? Louis staggered back from the window. The figure remained, still, silent, no longer grinning, just watching. Then, with a blink that came from the wrong direction, bottom eyelid first, it faded. Not stepped back. Faded. And the night returned to silence. The next morning, Claude was gone. His boots still by the door, his coat hanging on the nail, but no sign of him, except Louis found a carving in the butcher's block. Not words, a shape, a window drawn in blood with flesh nailed across it. The center peeled away like a door swinging inward. Louis searched the house, the barn, the shed. Nothing, but the pigs were nervous. They pressed against the fence, eyes wide, backs trembling. And in the dirt just outside the shed, someone had scrawled, "He's looking from the wrong side now." He spent the next 2 nights awake. Lantern lit, knife ready. The window stayed dark. But on the 3rd night, there was a reflection, not a shadow. A perfect mirror inside the black pane, showing the butcher's shed exactly as it was, except it had no roof. And the meat hooks hanging inside held people, not pigs. One of them was Claude. The hook went through his jaw. Louis screamed. Threw the lantern at the window. Passed through. Not shattered. Not cracked. Passed through. Like the glass was a film of water, rippling briefly. The inside stayed untouched. But when he turned around, his lantern lay shattered on the floor behind him. He'd never thrown it. Or he had, and it had gone both ways. That night he didn't sleep. He locked every door. Boarded the cellar. Nailed the butcher's shed shut from the outside. But come morning, the house smelled like iron and smoke. And in the kitchen the knives were gone. All of them, except one. His grandfather's boning knife, now set on the cutting board. Still wet. And beside it, laid out on butcher paper, was a strip of human tongue. Still twitching. He ran. Took Claude's truck. Drove into town. Told the sheriff everything, window, skin, Claude, the dreams. They followed him back. Found the house empty.
No shed.
No window. Just a blank wall, white painted. No blood.
No hooks. No pig fence.
The land looked like it hadn't been farmed in decades. The sheriff frowned, patted his shoulder, told him to rest. But as he turned to leave, the deputy whispered to Louis, "You looked in, didn't you? Now it'll always know where to find you." Louis didn't go back to the farm. He rented a room above a hardware store in a nearby town. Changed his name on the mailbox. Stopped answering the phone. Told himself he'd imagined it all. But the dreams followed. Every night the window came back. In the floor. In the ceiling. Sometimes in his own chest. A hollow square of darkness that watched from the inside. He stopped sleeping. Stopped eating. Until one morning, someone slipped a package under his door. Wrapped in brown butcher paper. Tied with twine. Inside a mirror. The exact dimensions of the butcher's window. And on the glass, scrawled in grease pencil, "Still hungry." He smashed the mirror. Burned the frame. Buried the glass in a churchyard. But that night, in the reflection of the motel television, the window returned. And this time it wasn't empty. A man was standing inside it. Or rather, something wearing a man. It had Louis's build. Louis's voice. Louis's eyes. But none of his bones were in the right place. The smile opened sideways. It whispered, "Every cut you don't make, I do. Every part you bury, I bring home." Louis found himself at the hospital the next morning. Self-inflicted wounds on both forearms. Clean, straight, but too shallow for death. He didn't remember doing it. The orderly said he was repeating a phrase in his sleep. Hook goes in. Pull toward the belly. Trim at the ear. They moved him to observation. He didn't resist. Because he saw it in his chart. Under allergies, someone had written, steel, salt, memory. In the ward, he met others. Quiet folks. Drifting folks. Each with a story that didn't sound like a story. A girl who said her bathroom mirror had screamed when she turned on the faucet. An old man who hadn't eaten meat in 45 years, because the last time he did, he tasted his sister's voice in the gristle. A child, too young to speak, who drew pictures of a window. Always the same shape. Always filled with faces that weren't hers. One night, Louis found blood under his pillow. Not his. Folded in a handkerchief with a note. "You're slicing wrong. Come home and I'll show you." He broke out that night. Stole a bus. Rode north. The road led him back. Of course it did. The house was gone. But the shed remained. Standing alone in a bare field. No trees. No animals. Just that window square in the back wall. Open. He approached with the caution of a man returning to a wound. Inside, the floor was clean. The hooks empty. Except one. Claude's coat hung from it. In the pocket, a key. Taped to the key was a note. 1 cut feeds him. 2 binds him. 3 opens the door. Louis took the key and turned toward the window. The black pane was waiting. Still, patient, and hungry. Louis stepped to the window. Close enough to feel the cold radiating from it. Not the chill of air, but the cold of absence. Of something that shouldn't exist but did, humming like a nerve about to snap. The key in his hand felt warm. Alive. Its teeth were notched with tiny runes. Symbols he'd seen scratched into the bones Claude buried behind the pig shed all those years ago. There was no keyhole. But Louis knew what to do. He raised the key and pressed it to his own chest. Just below the collarbone. The skin gave way like damp parchment. No blood. Just smoke. And as the smoke poured out, the window opened. Not inward. Not outward. Just open. The frame bent impossibly. Like heat mirage. Like breath behind glass. Inside, Louis saw a long room. Stone walls. Meat hooks. A floor that dripped not blood but echo. And in the center stood the butcher. He was not a man. Not exactly. He had a human form, but it was constructed like a diagram in motion. Shifting blades for joints, tendons of corded rope, skin stretched over bone that pulsed backward. His face was ever-changing. A carousel of masks, each face familiar, each one of someone Louis had loved. And they were all weeping. The butcher held out a cleaver. It shimmered like wet steel but had no reflection. Louis understood. Deep in his marrow, he could run again. Live small, vanish, decay in some cheap room. Or take the cleaver. Cut what needed cutting. And maybe, just maybe, end this. He reached out. The cleaver sank into his hand like it had always belonged there. The butcher smiled. A slit that ran from jaw to jaw. And then stepped back, inviting him in. Louis climbed through the window. It was like passing through ice water, then bone, then nothing. His feet landed on cold stone, and the window behind him sealed shut. He was inside now, inside the place where meat remembers. The butcher gestured to the wall. Rows of hooks, each one hung apart. An arm, a heart, the tongue, each one labeled with a name. His father, his grandfather, his own. 1 cut feeds him, 2 binds him, 3 opens the door. Louis raised the cleaver and began to cut. Not flesh, not his memory. He cut his first memory. A birthday at age 6 gone. Next, his first kiss. Then the last time he cried. Each slice sent shadows screaming into the corners. Each memory removed fed the room. The walls pulsed, the ceiling groaned. He began to fade, and the butcher began to stitch. When it was done, Louis stood naked of memory. No past, no name, just a body shaped like a man holding a cleaver that hummed with every forgotten life. The butcher stepped forward and placed a hand on Louis's head, and said simply, "Now you can serve." Louis awoke in the butcher's shed. Dawn outside, the window gone. The cleaver still in his hand. But he didn't remember what it was for. He didn't remember anything. But someone would come. They always did. And when they stood too close to the back wall, when they peered into the empty frame that wasn't a window until they saw it was, he'd be there, smiling, holding the cleaver, and whispering, "Welcome to the cut." Years passed. The farm changed hands 3 times. Each new owner found the shed still standing. Old, weather-beaten, empty, they said. No tools, no hooks, no window. They'd paint over the frame, tear down walls, till the fields plant soy or hay. But always, always, the dreams would start. The last owner, a young couple from Madison, bought the place for a song. Said they wanted a quiet life, escape from the city, fresh air. They tore down the shed completely, built a chicken coop in its place. But every few weeks they'd find one of the hens split clean in half, no blood, no mess, just emptied. And on the wall of the coop, carved in fine, shaking script, "Feed cuts cleanest when no one looks." The wife began sleepwalking, staring into corners that weren't there. One morning, she was found in the garden, holding a butcher's knife she didn't own. She was cutting rows into the soil with surgical precision. Each furrow wide enough to lay a man in. Each labeled with a name she'd never heard before. Her own was last. The husband never spoke again after that. But on his final night, He wrote a note in flour on the kitchen floor. The window's in me now. I cut when I blink. They found him smiling in the pantry, his face perfectly carved away. No blood, no body, just the shape. County Incident Report, unfiled, Dane County Registry, 1963, 1997, 9 unexplained disappearances tied to the same plot of land. 3 houses abandoned mid-meal. 1 newborn found with a butcher's cleaver etched into its sternum. Each event was tied to the word spoken or carved nearby. Welcome to the cut. Folklore says the butcher isn't a man or a ghost. He's a trade. A deal made in silence, sealed by blade. The price isn't pain. It's what you remember. And every time you forget a birthday, a smell, a name, the window opens a little wider. If you see it, don't look into it. Don't speak your name near it. Don't let it remember you. And if it speaks in your voice, run. But know this, once it knows your cut, it never forgets. The first thing they noticed was that the scarecrow had moved. Not far, just a few feet. Closer to the corn. Arms stretched a little wider. Head tilted slightly, like it was listening. But the next morning it had moved again. Then again. By the end of the week, it stood in the middle of the yard, facing the house. The Carter family had lived on the old McNally farm for less than a month. 2 kids, a fixer-upper dream, and the kind of optimism you only have before you see what really lives in the cracks. Nina Carter first noticed the scarecrow's change on October 3rd. She assumed Daniel had moved it. He assumed she had. But the kids? They just stared at it through the living room window. Especially Jonah, the youngest. He whispered things to it. Names mostly, not theirs. By the second week, the scarecrow's face had changed. His burlap was tighter. Mouth stitched closed with wire, not twine. And the buttons it used for eyes? One of them was green. One of them was blue. Just like Nina's. She stood on the porch that evening, coat pulled tight, staring across the brittle grass. The thing didn't move, didn't sway, not even as the wind shook the trees. She felt it. Not saw, not heard. Felt it watching her. Daniel burned it the next day. Dragged it out behind the silo and lit it with gasoline and half a book of matches. Screamed. Not aloud. Not in any real way. But in his mind. Something clawed at the back of his teeth, shrieking. He almost let go of the can. Almost let it spill on his boots. But it burned. All of it. They buried the ashes. Spread salt. Bought a new one from the feed store 2 towns over. The next morning, the old one was back. Standing in the exact same spot. Only now it was smiling. The wire mouth had been pulled apart. Just a little. Like someone had worked it loose with a knife. Jonah said, "He says thanks." That night, Nina had a dream. The scarecrow stood over her in bed, head tilted sideways, one hand raised. Not straw, not glove, but a perfect copy of her own hand, down to the scar on the knuckle from when she'd broken it at 13. It stroked her cheek and said, "I don't blink anymore, Mama. You taught me better." She woke to find mud on her sheets and a single corn husk tucked under her pillow. The family dog disappeared on October 11th. His chain had been snapped, not chewed, not broken, untied, laid in a neat circle outside the barn. Inside the barn, a new scarecrow, this one wearing the dog's collar. Its hands were covered in fur and teeth. They called a priest, an actual one. Father Corbin drove in from a diocese that hadn't answered calls in a decade. He wouldn't go near the scarecrow, wouldn't look at it, but he whispered something as he passed. "They never blink. That's how they remember your face." Then he handed Daniel a vial of water that smelled like rust. "Don't put it on the field. Put it on your eyes." Nina asked, "What happens if we just leave?" Corbin looked at her, smiled, and said, "The fields go where you go. They remember your weight." The next day, Jonah didn't come down for breakfast. Nina found him sitting on the floor of his bedroom, arms wrapped around his knees, eyes wide open. not blinking. When she knelt beside him and touched his cheek, he whispered, "He's teaching me how." She looked toward the window. The scarecrow was right outside, closer than ever, pressed against the glass. Its head was cocked, and now it wore Jonah's shirt. Daniel tried to take it down again, this time with hedge clippers, gloves, holy water. He got within 6 feet before his nose started to bleed. By the time he raised the clippers, he couldn't see the scarecrow anymore. Just rows and rows of blinking eyes, stitched into the air around it. He collapsed, woke up 3 hours later, hands tied behind his back. In the barn, with a sack of grain stuffed in his mouth and a button sewn into his palm. That night, Nina packed the car. She didn't care what the priest had said. She grabbed the kids, threw clothes into a trash bag, left the dishes in the sink. When she went outside to start the engine, all 4 tires had been replaced with husks. Corn husks, tightly braided, solid as rubber. The engine started, then growled, not like a machine, like an animal. Something inside the car breathed. They didn't try to leave again. Jonah stopped talking. He stared out the window all day. Didn't eat, didn't blink. When Nina finally screamed at him to say something, anything, he looked at her with hollow, button-pupiled eyes and said, "It's not the same scarecrow anymore. Every time it gets closer, it grows more of us. One of these days, it won't be standing out there. It'll be standing in here." That night, Nina locked every door, every window, pushed furniture against the sliding glass door. But around midnight, she heard whispers. From the vents, from the floorboards, from inside the walls. Dozens of voices, all familiar. Jonah, Daniel, her sister, her mother who'd been dead for 15 years. And they all whispered the same thing. "You're being watched the right way now." The power went out. The clock stopped. And the house breathed in slow, measured pulses, like it had lungs in the foundation. In the silence, something walked the hall. Soft steps, straw dragging across wood. A scrape at the bedroom door. Nina held her breath. The door didn't open, but when morning came, the locks were on the outside. Jonah was gone, the front door wide open. Across the lawn, at the edge of the corn, the scarecrow stood, now taller, its arms longer, and in its stitched chest was a child-sized imprint. A hollow, like something had crawled in. Nina tore through the corn, barefoot, screaming Jonah's name, flashlight in one hand, the other clutched tight around the vial the priest had given them. The stalks whispered back, not in wind, in words. "He's not lost. He's planted. He's learning how to watch like we do. Every time you blink, he forgets a little more of you." She found the scarecrow at the center of the field. It towered over her now, 7 feet tall, its legs rooted into the dirt, one arm outstretched like it had just finished reaching. His face was no longer burlap. It was skin, Jonah's skin, but stretched too wide, too smooth. Its eyes, 2 green buttons, stared without focus. The mouth was just an opening, not stitched shut anymore. Inside, teeth, too many, and something moving. Nina screamed and threw the vial. It burst across the scarecrow's chest with a hiss. Steam rose, the air warped, but the scarecrow didn't move. Instead, it whispered in her voice, "You always said you'd do anything for your son, anything to keep him safe. So why won't you blink?" She blinked, just once, and in that fraction of a second the scarecrow was gone. But something was behind her, breathing. She turned, no one there, but the sky had changed. It was dusk now. Seconds ago it had been morning, and the corn around her had grown taller, thicker. The path she'd cut with her feet and panic was gone. She ran. Branches scratched her arms. Voices whispered from the husks. One of them sounded like Jonah. "Mama, come lie down. It's easier when you're soft. Easier to shape." She broke through the corn into the yard, collapsed on the porch. Daniel was waiting, only not Daniel. His skin looked stretched, his eyes too still. He smiled with Jonah's mouth and said, "He's inside now. So am I." The scarecrow doesn't blink. "So we don't have to." Nina backed away, ran upstairs, locked herself in the bathroom. The mirror had changed. It was no longer her reflection. It was the scarecrow's face, blinking for the first time. And with each blink, a memory vanished from her mind. Jonah's first word, Daniel's laugh, her own name. She screamed, but it came out as rustling, like wind through corn. She collapsed in the tub and whispered, over and over, "He doesn't blink. He doesn't blink. He doesn't." Until the scarecrow's voice whispered back, "Then neither do you. That was 2 years ago. The Carter house stands empty now. Grass grows waist-high. The corn never dies. People say they see someone in the window, or in the field, or on the porch smiling. A scarecrow, maybe, or maybe just someone you used to love, learning how to watch you forever." Local legend, extract from Farms and Folklore of Eastern Nebraska, 2006, The Carter Farm Scarecrow, is one of the more recent additions to Nebraska's growing body of rural horror lore. Unlike older tales involving harvest spirits or cornfield hauntings, this figure is notable for one detail repeated across nearly all sightings. It never blinks. Witnesses describe a humanoid shape standing just outside the tree line, motionless, eyes open. No matter how long you watch, it never moves until you turn away. Then it's closer, not walking, just reappearing, like a slide in a projector. One frame forward, one heartbeat late. School bus report driver log, October 31, 2004, Route 47. McNally District child at stop 12 said a scarecrow waved at him. Thought he was joking. Kid didn't laugh. Said it had daddy's smile now. I've asked the district for a camera install. Nothing's been done. Marking this entry for liability. Something is wrong with that field. Back to Nina, or what remained of her. Weeks had passed, or maybe years. Time warped in the Carter house now. Clocks ran backward. Radios whispered static hymns in languages no one spoke. She stayed in the upstairs bedroom. Never slept. Never blinked. The mirror had grown roots. Literal vines of silvered glass crawling from the frame and down into the walls. Sometimes at night it breathed. She rarely spoke. But when she did, it was always to the corner, where a shadow stood that looked almost like a boy. Jonah, still 7, still barefoot, eyes button bright and stitched shut. He would whisper, "They're all scarecrows now. Even you, Mama." Nina's skin had started to flake. Not rot, split. Like burlap. Thin, cracking fibers where muscle had once been. She didn't bleed anymore. Just dropped little piles of dust and husk. Her reflection wasn't hers. It was his. The one who watched. The first scarecrow. The one who'd taught her how. Sometimes she walked to the porch. Stood in the same spot Daniel had stood before the change. Sometimes a truck would pass. Slow down. The driver would see a woman in shadow, and swear later her eyes were green and blue, wide and unmoving. She didn't wave, didn't smile, just watched. The way they do. And out in the corn they waited. Hundreds now. Not just one scarecrow. Dozens. Each one shaped like someone who'd tried to leave. Who'd tried to blink and forget. But the field doesn't forget. Plants you. And grows you into something that remembers too well. Excerpt, Sheriff's Report, 2005. Carter property officially condemned. Trespassers report feelings of being watched. One teen returned after 2 days missing mute, covered in straw beneath his skin. Only words spoken since. She watches better than we ever did. They say the Carter farm is empty now. But that's not quite true. Because every October, just after the first frost, the corn starts whispering again. Not in wind, in names. Some old, some new. And each name is followed by a sound like dry fingers brushing across a window pane. Then silence, until someone looks. Urban legend says, if you drive by the Carter place at night, and flash your headlights toward the field 3 times, you'll see something standing just beyond the edge of the corn. Still, tall, smiling. It won't move. Not at first. But if you look away, even for a second, it'll be closer when you look back. Closer and wearing your face. Final report found in unsent email draft on Daniel Carter's work laptop. There were rules. We didn't know them. No one told us. The scarecrow isn't a protector. He's a collector. He gathers the ones who blink. The ones who forget to be still. He remembers every time you looked away. Every time you closed your eyes when you should have seen something. Now I see everything. I don't sleep. I don't turn. I don't blink. Neither should you. Witness statement. Local gas station attendant, 2007, saw a woman walk in last week. Middle of the night. She looked dried out. Like her skin was paper. Like she'd been stuffed. Didn't speak. Just stared. Didn't blink the whole time I filled her tank. When she left, I realized I couldn't remember her eyes. Just that I couldn't stop looking at them. Later that night, I found a scarecrow by the dumpsters. Dressed like me. Even had my name tag. They say if you blink while standing on the Carter farm, something opens its eyes in your place. And if you stay long enough, you'll start to feel it behind your own. That stretch of silence. That slow stare. That feeling that someone, something, is waiting for you to sleep, so it can wear your smile next. Letter from Anna DeLorme to her sister Mabel postmarked. May 6, 1974 Mabel, the farm is beautiful in the spring. The green here looks older, if that makes sense, like it remembers what came before people. Paul's taken to fixing up the barn. He's obsessed with this old stone well behind the house. Keeps saying, "We'll make it useful again." I told him to leave it. Something about it unsettles me. There are no frogs, no moss, no smell. Just a perfect circle of stone. And it's cold near it. Always. Even in the sun. The kids won't go near it. They say it's too quiet. Love, Anna journal entry. Paul DeLorme, May 9, 1974. I've measured it twice now. The well goes far deeper than I expected. Dropped a rock down. Counted to 11 before hearing it hit something soft. 11 seconds. That's over 1,000 feet. It doesn't make sense. It's just old farmland. No one builds a well that deep, not with hand tools. But it's real. And it's calling. I know that sounds insane, but I hear something. Not words. Just presence. Letter from Anna unsent. May 14, 1974. He's not sleeping. He stares at it for hours now. Not doing anything. Not lowering the bucket. Just watching. He says the bottom moves sometimes. Last night, I found him outside at 3 a.m., kneeling by the stones. His hands were raw, nails cracked. He said, "It showed me its hunger." I don't know what that means. Mabel, I think the well is making him sick. But when I mention filling it, he gets violent. Quiet, but cold. Like it's not him anymore. Transcript, tape recording, labeled. Well, May 16, 1974. Sound of wind, distant creaking. Paul. I lowered the mic down again. Built a pulley. Nothing but static for hours. But then, it started whispering. Long silence. Paul, faintly, it's my voice. But not me. It's saying things I haven't said yet. Thud. Static crackle. Paul. It's not an echo. It's a rehearsal. Field note. Found scribbled in margin of Paul's journal. It wants something. It won't climb out. It wants to be lowered. Journal entry. Anna DeLorme, May 17, 1974. There was a dream. The well was open wide, too wide, and a rope came up from the dark, knotted with fingers. They weren't dead. They were reaching. When I looked over the edge, it wasn't stone at the bottom. It was a face. Not human, but it looked like it had been waiting a long, long time. Last confirmed entry. Paul's handwriting dated. May 18, 1974. I'm going down. It showed me what's beneath. I think it's part of me. The rope is strong. The light won't matter. I'll bring something back. Something older than the dirt we till. She's hungry. Paul was never seen again. Only the rope came back up. And it was wet. Letter from Mabel to Sheriff Conway dated May 25, 1974. Sheriff, I write to you not as a sister but as a desperate woman. My brother-in-law, Paul DeLorme, has been missing for a week. My sister Anna insists he went into the well, the one behind their farmhouse, but that doesn't make any damn sense. People don't climb into wells that deep and leave no trace but a wet rope and a ring of dead birds around the stonework. Please, for God's sake, go out there. Something is wrong with that place. Sheriff's Field Report, May 26, 1974. Investigator. Sheriff John Conway arrived at DeLorme property at 6:42 a.m. House appeared in poor repair. Windows covered. Front porch had symbols carved into floorboards, not vandalism. Intentional. Anna answered the door. Looked sleep-deprived. Thin. Clothes smelled of ash. Wouldn't let me near the well. Told me. He's not all the way gone yet. I pressed for details. She said Paul was learning to speak in reverse truths. I told her I'd be back with backup and a search team. Her response, if you come with more people, she'll notice. Tape recording, local radio station interference log, May 29, 1974, 11:37 p.m., audio cuts in mid-sentence. And if you're just tuning in, wait. What the hell is that? Whispers. Low-frequency static. A second voice, like an echo from beneath a lake. Paul, did you bring me her teeth? I'm still hungry. Screech. Transmission cuts out. Anna's journal, May 30, 1974. The well moves now. Not the stones. The mouth. I saw it yawn this morning, just as the fog broke over the ridge. It exhaled something cold. And there were shapes inside it. Crawling. They looked like men made of rope and bone. One of them waved. He had Paul's smile. Excavation notes. University of Virginia, Anthropology Division, June 1974. Unofficial survey of Appalachian mineral fissures. Student reports from anonymous tip led us to DeLorme Farm. Old well located 60 feet behind house. Structure clearly predates home. Stonework pre-colonial, possibly pre-human. Dropped sonar probe. Recorded depth of 147 feet. However, signal was looping. Same echo returned 4 times. Final reading, you're already inside. Final letter from Anna, never mailed. Dated June 1, 1974. Mabel. I finally understand what Paul meant. The well isn't a hole. It's a vein. It's part of something beneath all of us. Something dreaming in the deep dark, tasting us through the water and dirt and memories. It doesn't want us dead. It wants us to belong. I'm going down tonight. I'll bring him back. Or become what he couldn't. Tell the children never to drink from the pump. It remembers who they were. Sheriff's Incident Log, June 2, 1974. Filed by Deputy Laura Mays. Responded to a noise complaint at the DeLorme residence. Arrived to find the house abandoned. All doors locked from the inside. Windows blacked out with dirt, not paint. Soil layered an inch thick on the glass from the inside. Furniture overturned. Symbols scratched into the floor, walls, even the ceiling. Back door was wide open. Led directly to the well. The well had changed. It was no longer circular. It had angles, corners, stone edges that folded in on themselves like a spiral made of bone. Found on site. Tape recorder cassette labeled, her voice, Anna. Soft breathing, wind, then whispering Anna. She speaks in thirst. You don't hear her. You feel her. Her name isn't made of letters. It's made of hunger. She remembers when we were still crawling through the mud, before we learned to stand, before we could forget. The water isn't water. It's her saliva. Carries your shape. She's not at the bottom. She's everywhere beneath. Postmortem report, unidentified, remains June 5, 1974 recovered fragments from within the well shaft at 400 feet bone structure human-like, but elongated. Vertebrae fused with unknown material resembling stone. No known burial practices align. Tissue analysis inconclusive. Cells demonstrated twitching behavior, despite being severed from all neural connection. One finger was still tapping, slowly, as if counting. All samples returned to evidence storage evaporated overnight. Storage chamber left smelling of wet earth and iron. Children's drawings, found in DeLorme attic crayon, charcoal ash. Images consistent across all 4 pages. A large well with teeth in its inner rim, long ropes with hands instead of knots, and a figure labeled only, Mommy/not Mommy. Field note. University survey team, June 6. Lead geologist Henry Brask has gone missing. Last seen near the well at 2:14 a.m. Survey logs indicate he was recording sound resonance in the stones. Final written note. The deeper we measure, the more it remembers. She's building a shape to climb up with. Unmarked audio log. Found within well equipment bag. Voice identified. Paul DeLorme. We thought the well was just for water. But it's a mouth. It drinks you. Each drop we pulled was her memory of us. And each bucket we took down, we gave her more of our shape. I'm not Paul anymore. I'm what she used to look like. The DeLorme farm was declared condemned and burned down by state order in late June 1974. But the well remained. The fire wouldn't touch it. And at night, locals say they hear it breathing. Not wind, not water, just the slow inhale of something that never left. Newspaper clipping. The Appalachia Gazette, July 12, 1974 headline. Vanishing volunteers. 3 more missing from DeLorme site in the ongoing investigation of the now-abandoned DeLorme property. 3 graduate students from the University of Virginia vanished while attempting an unauthorized descent into the property's ancient well. The rope was retrieved 27 minutes later, coiled neatly beside the opening, tied in a shape resembling a sleeping infant. One recovered tape recorder included a single phrase repeated 117 times. We go down as many times as it takes. The bottom never stops changing. Personal letter filed but never sent from Henry Brask, missing geologist, to his fiancée Elaine. My darling, I think I understand now. It's not a well. It's not even a place. It's a fold, like in cloth or skin, where something enormous rests its eye. It's not watching us out of malice. It's watching because it needs to remember how to wear us again. The deeper we go, the more we match its shape. I love you. If I don't return, I hope I was never real enough to miss. Field broadcast ham radio distortion log intercepted July 14, 1974 3:17 a.m. Shadows rising along the walls. Deeper now. Can't hear my own breathing, but hers is louder every second. The teeth are real. They're in the stone. But the tongue is made of names. She said my name with my father's voice. I almost believed it was safe. We are only echoes. And she is tired of silence. Anna's final entry journal page burnt around edges. I found him. Not Paul, but what was left. His shape remade in rope, stitched together with bone, hollow behind the eyes. But he reached out, and his touch felt warm. I went deeper. She let me. She's not cruel. She's not kind. She is the space between things. The memory before breath. The mother of forgetting. I'm gonna rest now. Not sleep. Just lie still and let her finish remembering me. Documented phenomenon. Post-fire site report. August 1974 observed by state surveyor #144. Codename Glassworm. Well opening now measures 15 feet across. Formerly 4 feet. No visible bottom. Stonework appears to rearrange between viewings. Echo patterns include known missing persons' voices. Subject #144 reported, feeling known, when near the rim. Last words recorded before resignation. She's not at the bottom. She's beneath the shape of bottom itself. Locals now call it the never well. They say if you drop something precious inside, it doesn't fall. It's kept, held, until one day, someone else hears your voice whispering from the depths, saying, "Lower me again. I'm not done remembering." Undated recording retrieved from Bern Sheriff's Office storage locker. Cassette #DL9. Tape clicks on silence, then shallow breathing voice. Anna? Fragmented. It remembers you by your weight on the rope. The first time you leaned over the edge, it knew the size of your shadow. It doesn't want you to fall. It wants you to choose. Long pause, then the sound of a bucket pulley creaking. Down is the only honest direction. Unmarked autopsy notes, dated 1979 subject. Recovered from collapsed mine near DeLorme site body. Intact, though desiccated. Tissue, human DNA, but cells show signs of ancient exposure, salt-heavy, petrified marrow. Stomach contents, none. But instead of organs, subject contained 14 small stones carved with unknown sigils, a length of wet rope tied into a noose, a note written in nerve fiber, spelling one word, home. Appellation oral history, collected 1981 interviewer. Dr. Judith Amaze subject, Elias Boone, age 91, lifelong resident. Oh, the well? That ain't just water down there, no ma'am. My granddaddy said we don't dig where the earth already opened itself. A hole that deep is not dug, it's born. And if you listen real careful on moonless nights, you'll hear it muttering, trying to pronounce you. Final page. Torn from Anna's journal, charred but legible. I feel her in my teeth now. She hums when I speak. She's building something with our voices. A ladder made of prayers and apologies and unspoken truths. The well doesn't want you to drown. It wants you to understand what drowning means when water remembers your shape. If you're reading this, you've heard it too. You've stood at the edge. And now, part of you is already below. Postscript, 2006 update. The land has been sold. Developers plan to fill the shaft with concrete. A good plan. Except, every night since the trucks arrived, workers report the same dream. They wake up at the bottom of the well, looking up, watching something huge and formless leaning over the edge. And just before they wake, it says, "You measure depth wrong. There's always deeper." No one wanted to talk about the lamb born in the black barn. Not even Hazel, who delivered it. Not even Thomas, who raised the ram. And certainly not Ruth, whose you had carried the thing full term. It was born in silence.
No bleatin.
No blood. Just a wet, pale mass that slipped out of the mother like it was waiting.
No bones.
No hooves. No eyes. Just folds of damp skin and a mouth that moved without sound. Hazel, midwife to 100 lambings in 30 years, stepped back in horror. She had delivered conjoined twins before. Stillbirths. Malformed skulls. But nothing like this. The thing moved without structure. Slid more than it walked. But it followed Ruth everywhere. Wouldn't let her sleep. Wouldn't eat hay. Only sat in the corner of the barn, watching with a face that looked like it was trying to form hers. Ruth tried to kill it on the third day. Tried to smother it with a sack. The lamb didn't resist. But the sack came away dry, as if it had passed through smoke. That night, Ruth found hoofprints on her bedroom floor. Only, they were inside out. By the end of the week, the lamb had grown. Not bigger, longer. The spine still didn't exist. But it stretched. Could loop twice around the fence posts. And when Thomas checked the barn one night, he found the lamb writing in the dirt with the tip of its face. Words he didn't know. Not in English. Not in anything. But one word kept repeating, Ruth. 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 Hazel begged Ruth to burn it. Said things like, "It's not of this season." And nothing born without bones should be this warm. Ruth refused. Said she saw something in its mouth. Teeth like baby fingers. They locked the barn. Left it without feeding the thing for 3 days. But it didn't starve. It multiplied. On the fourth day, Ruth opened the barn and found not one lamb but 12. All boneless, all silent, all smiling without mouths. They circled her. And in the center of the dirt was a placenta the size of a full-grown ewe. Pulsed. And from inside it came a voice that sounded like her own, saying, "I made this from your silence." Thomas tried to call the vet, but the phone line only returned breathing. Hazel packed her truck. Left in the night. Never returned. Left behind a note that read, "It's not that it shouldn't exist. It's that we helped it want to." Ruth was last seen standing in the barn doorway, hands covered in milk and ash, staring down at a lamb that finally stood. It had bones now, but they weren't its own. They were hers. Ruth didn't speak for days. When she did, it was only in whispers, low and slow like the lamb's breathing in the corner of the barn. She said the creature was learning how to live in the skin it hadn't earned. She said it hummed songs at night, songs her mother used to sing, songs about fields and rain and things buried beneath. Thomas returned from town one evening to find the barn door open. The lambs were gone. Only a trail of wet footprints leading into the forest. Ruth was sitting beneath the old willow, humming softly, her eyes empty. In her lap lay a small bundle wrapped in hay. He approached cautiously. Ruth looked up. Her smile was different, wide and wrong. She whispered, "They taught me to fold the body to hide the shape, to make it soft, to let the bones fall where they may." The bundle stirred, and Ruth reached inside. The thing in her arms was a lamb, perfect with white fur and bright eyes. But when it blinked, its mouth opened too wide, wider than any animal should. Inside, a row of tiny hands waved. That night, the forest echoed with the sound of hundreds of lambs. Not bleating, not crying, but singing. A chorus of whispers, promises. Hazel's old pickup was found abandoned by the river weeks later. Inside was a notebook, pages filled with drawings of the lamb, of the forest, and one repeated phrase scrawled over and over. "The bones want to be born. The body just has to wait." Ruth disappeared during the next storm. Her house was found empty, windows shattered, the barn door wide open, and in the mud, a single hoofprint. Neighbors say that every spring since, when lambs are born, some come out soft and pale, with no bones, with eyes that watch. The spring after Ruth vanished, Thomas tried to sell the farm, but no one would buy land that seemed to hold a secret in its soil. The lambs kept being born, soft, boneless, silent. Sometimes Thomas swore he saw them moving in the fields, long, pale shapes weaving between the tall grass. One evening, Thomas found a lamb alone in the barn.
No bones. No mouth.
But its face was changing. It began to form, to pull together. First sprouted in patches, then furred over smooth skin. Eyes blinked open, and its face was hers. That night, Thomas awoke to soft breathing beside his bed. He turned and saw the lamb, standing on all fours, its head tilted like it was listening. When he reached out, the lamb opened its mouth, not to bleat, but to speak. "Help me," it whispered. Thomas fell back. The lamb's eyes filled with tears, but when he wiped them away, they were seeds. The next day, Thomas went into the barn with a knife. But when he tried to strike the lamb, his hand froze. He felt something inside him moving, like roots, like the lamb was not just a creature, but a part of the farm itself. Thomas disappeared 2 weeks later. The barn was found locked from the inside. Inside, 12 lambs lay curled together, all boneless, all silent, and one in the center. That lamb had a face carved in smooth white bone. The face on the central lamb was not just carved, it was etched deep, like the mark of something ancient. Its eyes were holes, dark and empty, yet somehow filled with an unspoken hunger. Thomas's old journal was found tucked under the lamb's neck, damp with dew and soil. Inside, One entry was scrawled in trembling handwriting. They are growing, not in flesh or bone, but in silence. The farm is becoming hollow, and I am their keeper. Farmhands who dared enter afterward reported hearing faint whispers, voices like wind through dry grass, promising things no one could remember. Some say the lambs were not born but made, woven from dreams and fears, stitched from the shadows lurking just beneath the earth. The last sighting came years later. A neighbor reported seeing a woman walking through the fields with 12 lambs trailing behind her. No sound.
No motion.
Just a trail of pale footprints leading deep into the forest. The woman turned. Her eyes were empty. Her mouth was a thin line of bone. She whispered a name, Ruth, and the lambs followed. Years passed. The farm stood abandoned. Neighbors reported strange lights flickering in the barn at night. The air around the property smelled of damp wool and old earth. And in the quiet moments, some claimed they could hear a soft chorus, a low, breathless lullaby sung by unseen voices. Local legend grew, whispered warnings about the lamb with no bones, a creature not born but made, a hollowed thing that took shape from silence and loss, a reminder that some births should never happen. Those who ventured near the old farm tell similar tales, fleeting glimpses of pale shapes in the mist, the sound of soft footsteps in wet grass, a whisper carried on the wind, repeating the name Ruth. And the lambs? They say the lambs don't die. They wait, waiting for the next season, for the next silence to fill, for the next body to forget itself. If you ever hear a soft, wet breath in the barn, if you see a pale lamb staring without eyes, if you feel the silence growing thick around you, remember this: some things are not meant to be born. The valley lay under the silver glare of a full harvest moon, fog drifting low among the vine-wrapped trellises that rimmed the old Hollow farm. For nearly a century, the Hollow family pressed cider, sold apples, and hosted the annual equinox feast beneath those same boughs, always in late September, always when the moon rose round and amber. By dusk on September 23, 1979, the new generation, Rebecca Hollow and her cousins Marcus and Eliza, had gathered at the farmhouse for the first equinox feast since Grandpa Silas's death. His will required the heirs to host one final harvest under the moon or relinquish the land forever. Rebecca carried a basket of freshly pressed cider apples through the orchard. The trees were bowed heavy with fruit, every branch groaning under the weight. In the hush, she recalled her grandmother's warning from years past. Never turn your back on the moon when the jars are full, or the Hollow takes. Now, as the moon climbed the sky, that old voice echoed in her mind. They set the banquet table on the lawn, a long plank of polished oak draped with crimson cloth. Bowls of roasted squash, plates of spiced pork, and jugs of amber cider lined its length. Lanterns hung from shepherd's hooks, their flames flickering as though dancing to an unheard tune. As the family took their seats, Marcus lifted his mug and proposed the traditional toast. To plenty beneath the moon, and to family bound by blood and soil. They drank deeply. The cider was sweet, with an undernote of something far older, earthy and primal. Eliza shivered and glanced upward. The moonlight slanted through the apple boughs, casting long, skeletal shadows. Suddenly, a distant rumble rolled through the valley, as if the earth itself sighed. The lanterns wavered. The children stilled their laughter. Rebecca's heart thumped against her ribs. From the edge of the orchard came a single, slow creak, the old cider press turning under moonlight, though no one had powered it since her grandfather's passing. Marcus stood. That press, it's never moved on its own. Eliza's voice cracked. They said we should set the gears once more, to honor him. Rebecca clenched her jaw. In an instant, the press's handle turned again, grinding stone against wood, releasing the pungent scent of crushed fruit and rusted metal. A low chant began to rise, carried on the cold wind. It was neither human nor animal, more like the distant susurration of leaves, whispering an ancient name, Hollow, Hollow. Rebecca felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Lanterns guttered. She remembered Grandma's final words before she died. When the moon is full, you pay the toll. Feed the silent keeper, or the harvest ends you. As the press turned faster and the chant swelled, Rebecca realized tonight's feast would demand more than cider and song. Rebecca sprang to her feet, knocking her chair aside. The chant swelled, weaving through the orchard like a living thing. Lantern light flickered over pale faces. Eliza stared with wide eyes, and Marcus's jaw clenched, knuckles white on the mug. "Stop it!" Rebecca shouted, but her voice cracked. The cider press handle turned of its own accord, the grind of wood on metal echoing through the trees. A wind rushed down the valley, carrying with it the scent of rot and something sweeter, like overripe fruit left to ferment under the moon. The apples around them trembled on their branches, and one by one began to fall. They hit the ground with soft thuds, rolling into the grass as though summoned. Eliza gasped. The apples, there, she never finished. A single apple, bruised and strange with dark veins, rolled to Rebecca's feet. As she leaned to pick it up, the lantern beside her guttered and died, plunging the table into wavering shadows. In the sudden half-light, Marcus flicked his torch, revealing movement at the orchard's edge. Figures, 3 in number, emerged, stepping between the trunks with uncanny grace. They wore patched linen cloaks dusted with orchard earth, faces hooded, voices lost to the rustle of boughs. One raised a hand toward the press. Rebecca recognized their stance from her grandfather's old journals. Farm hands at the equinox feast, bound by blood oaths. Their leader, an elderly man with a silver-white beard, tilted his head as though studying the turning gears. "Silas," Rebecca whispered. The old man at the press handle looked up, and his eyes, hollow yet shining, met hers. He spoke a word that echoed through the orchard, the final syllable of the chant. "Pay?" A memory seized Rebecca's mind, vivid and terrible. As a child, she'd crept into Grandpa Silas's study and found the family ledger. Rows of names scrawled in crimson ink, each date marking an equinox. Beside the pages, a pressed apple leaf stained dark. Underneath, her grandmother's trembling handwriting. Each harvest brings bounty. Each bounty demands reprisal. She had shivered then, too, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with autumn air. Now, under the harvest moon, she understood. The press slowed. The chant cut out abruptly, leaving an oppressive hush. The fallen apples at their feet began to rot almost instantly, white flesh blackening, worms appearing where none had been. The sweet smell turned sour. Marcus lurched forward, planting his boot on the press plank. "Enough!" He slammed down, jarring the mechanism to a halt. The press's feeble protest rattled through the wood, then stilled. The cloaked figures took a slow step back. The old man's hand lingered on the handle, as if reluctant to let go. His voice rasped 2 final words: balance upheld. With that, the figures receded into the trees, and the press lay silent, oil gumming its gears. Eliza sank to her knees, trembling so hard she could barely hold her mug. "What did they want?" she croaked. Rebecca knelt beside her, scanning the forest edge, but nothing stirred. "Cider," Rebecca said, voice steadying. "They wanted the feast." She looked to Marcus. "We must complete the ritual." He nodded, ashen-faced. Together, they lifted the broken cider press lid and poured the last of their jugs into the hopper. A soft glow began to pulse within the press, pale moonlight flickering through slats. The fruit within, apples bruised, whole, and even the rotted, merged in the bowl, turning amber, then onyx. A low vibration thrummed through the oak plank beneath their feet, as though the press bore a heartbeat. "We finished the feast," Marcus murmured, his breath fogged in the chill. "We feed the hollow." As the cider dripped into the awaiting barrels, a final hush fell. The wind died, the trees stilled, even the distant hoot of an owl ceased. Rebecca felt a presence at her shoulder, warm and watchful, neither benevolent nor cruel. Then, one by one, the lanterns reignited. Their flames burned bright gold, illuminating the table. In the glow, the cider was no longer liquid but something thicker, darker, like polished obsidian shot through with veins of molten copper. Rebecca grasped a goblet and raised it high. "To family," she intoned, echoing the toast. "To the hollow that nourishes us, and to the price we pay." They drank. As the cider slid down her throat, Rebecca felt a deep hollowing in her chest, as if each swallow carved space within her. Faces blurred around the table. The trees beyond shimmered. In that vertiginous moment, she tasted not just cider but memory. Visions of ancestors she'd never known. Their hands pressing apples in long-since-fallen barns, their laughter echoing faintly beneath the press. She realized then what it meant to feed the hollow, to offer not just harvests, but oneself, one's history, one's blood, one's soul laid bare before the moon's unblinking eye. When the goblet drained, the press clanged once, like a door closing. The glow died. The orchard's shadows returned. Only the cracked barrels of onyx cider remained, each sealed with wax stamped in the family sigil, a hollowed circle wrapped by a winding vine. Rebecca stood, legs unsteady but heart resolute. "It is done," she whispered. But deep in the orchard, beneath twisted roots and fallen leaves, the earth trembled, and from the darkest furrows, something ancient and patient began to stir. Dawn arrived in reluctant gray, the harvest moon's brilliance fading into a heavy mist. Rebecca stood at the orchard's edge, watching silver droplets bead on fallen leaves. Marcus and Eliza joined her, hollow-eyed. The barrels of onyx cider waited between them, sealed and ominous. "Eliza," Rebecca whispered, voice catching, "the cider must go to the townsfolk by sundown. They must partake." Eliza swallowed, nodding. "They'll drink it. We can't refuse." Marcus twisted the sigil-stamped wax seal on one barrel. As he broke it, a deep rumble shivered through the ground. The roots underfoot pulsed, and faint whispers, distant laughter, a child's giggle, threaded through the air. They loaded barrels onto an old wagon and set out for Hollow's End, the cluster of houses at the valley mouth. Each creak of the wagon wheels felt like a heartbeat echoing in the bones. Hollow's End Town Square, 10:30 a.m. The townspeople gathered warily, drawn by the scarlet cloth draped over the wagon. Children peered from behind their mothers' skirts. Elders muttered prayers they hadn't said in years. Rebecca stepped forward. "Friends," she called, lifting a chalice of the dark cider. "For generations your harvest sustained our family and this land. Today, we share our blessing with you." She poured deep, glossy liquid into each waiting cup. The crowd watched, eyes reflecting both trust and fear. One by one they drank. Silence reigned, an eerie hush deeper than night itself. Then, as the last drop vanished, a low sigh swept through them, like wind through empty barns. Faces softened. Bruises of worry seemed to fade. The old woman who'd lost her son smiled for the first time in years. Children clasped hands, eyes bright. Even the shut-in veiled behind her curtains stood at her door, peering out with tears of relief. Rebecca felt pride warm her chest. The hollow had accepted their offering. The valley seemed to exhale. Returned to the orchard, 5:45 p.m. The sun sank low, gold bleeding across the vines. Rebecca, Marcus, and Eliza returned to find the barrels empty. Each cup savored, each drop gone. "Balance," Marcus whispered, wiping sweat from his brow. "We gave and took." But as the moon's silver edge reappeared on the horizon, the press began to turn again. Slowly at first, then with the familiar creak that had become both warning and promise. Rebecca's heart thudded. They had kept the ritual. But at what cost? She approached the press. The hopper was empty. Yet inside, she sensed movement, as though something beneath the gears stirred, not angry, but hungry. Eliza touched Rebecca's arm. What comes next? Rebecca closed her eyes, recalling Grandma's final whisper. When the hollow awakens, you must answer, or the feast devours the feastmakers. Evening shadows, night fell fully. Lanterns lit themselves, casting flickering light on the empty banquet table. No food remained.
No cap stod.
Only the press, its handle spinning with inexorable rhythm. From the orchard's depths came footsteps, soft, deliberate. Rebecca peered into the shadows, lantern held high. 3 forms emerged. The cloaked figures, their faces still hidden, hands empty. They encircled the press, stepping in time with its turning. The eldest, Silas's specter, spoke with voice like dry leaves. The feast is done. The toll remains. Marcus swallowed. What does it toll? Another figure lifted a hand, revealing a sigil carved into its palm. An apple cradled by hollow vines. Then each peeled back their hood. Beneath stood ancestors, Silas and his precursors, eyes alight with moonfire, their mouths curved in sad smiles. Rebecca trembled. Why are you here? They spoke in unison, tone neither harsh nor kind. To harvest bounty, we offered flesh. To honor soil, we offered blood. To sustain land, we offer souls. The choice the press slowed, stopping with a final thump. The orchard fell utterly still. Lantern flames flickered and died, leaving only moonlight and shadow. Rebecca understood at once. The hollow did not merely receive, it demanded recompense. She spoke with trembling clarity. Take mine. Marcus and Eliza gasped. Rebecca, she raised her chin. I will not see you. A sad smile touched the ancient ones. Field note, Day 1 arrived at property mid-morning. Sky clear, wind light, soil dry and cracked. The locals warned me not to come. Called it cursed ground. Said animals won't graze on it. Birds won't fly over it. The acre itself is strange. It's a perfect square. 1 acre exactly. Surrounded by thriving wheat fields, all gold and moving in the breeze. But the acre in question, dead.
No grass. No insects.
No signs of life at all. Just dark gray soil and 1 tree in the center. Tree's bark is black. Not burned black like oil. No leaves. But it drips sap. Constantly. No other vegetation. Set up camp 50 yards from perimeter. Will begin soil tests in the morning. Field note, Day 2 soil samples taken at 5-foot intervals across perimeter. Initial readings are impossible. Radiation spike inside the acre, minor but unnatural. High levels of iron, calcium, and something I can't identify. Not a mineral. Not organic. Pulses under the scope. Like it's reacting to being observed. The further I walk into the center, the harder it is to breathe. Not from exertion. From pressure. Like the land is pressing upward. Returned to camp. Recalibrated equipment. Found footprints on the edge of the dead acre.
Bore.
Deep. Facing inward. No one else should be here. Field note, Day 3 dreamt I was standing in the center of the acre. The tree bent down and whispered in a voice like gravel underwater. It said, You're late. Woke with blood in my ears. Compass spins near the acre now. Can't find magnetic north. Birds circle but don't land. Something moves under the dirt. Caught it in the corner of my eye. Like a ripple. My hands shook for an hour after. Found bones today. Not animal. Small. Pale. Child-sized. They were arranged in a spiral around the base of the tree. No signs of weathering. Fresh. Clean. I buried them again. Felt like I was being watched. Field note, Night 3 something outside the tent. Heavy. Bipeds, not quadrupeds. Shuffling. Dragging. I stayed still. Held my breath. Heard something scrape the fabric of the tent. Slow like a fingertip. Didn't sleep. Field note, Day 4 I think I'm hearing music. Faint like a music box or wind chimes. But there's no wind. Every time I get near the center of the acre, the sound stops. But it starts again when I turn away. I left a recorder running overnight at the edge of the tree. Played the audio back. Static at first. Then, a voice. Don't measure. Don't weigh. Just feed it.
Eva requested pickup.
Radio won't transmit. Battery's full. No signal. Tried to hike to the road. The acre loops. I kept walking toward the farmhouse 200 yards north. But I ended up back at the tree. Every path leads back. Tonight I'm sleeping with the flashlight on and the knife in my hand. I've never believed in cursed land. But something here is hungry. And it knows my name. Field note. Day 5 something's changed. The tree is closer. I swear on my father's grave it was at least 40 feet from the tent yesterday. Now I could throw a stone and hit it.
No footprints. No drag marks.
Just closer. And the sap? It's running faster now. Thicker. Darker. I dipped a sample vial under the flow. The sap hissed as it hit glass. Like pouring acid onto ice. The bottom of the vial cracked. And inside the sap, I saw something. And it blinked. Field note. Late afternoon something was waiting at the edge of the field today. A man. Tall. Thin. Wearing old overalls, wide-brim hat pulled low. Couldn't see his face. He didn't move. Just stood with his arms at his sides, one hand holding a small bag. Like the kind used for seed. I yelled. Waved. Asked if he was with the department. He lifted a finger to his lips. And vanished. Field note. Nightfall, the dreams are getting louder. I don't even sleep now, I just slip under. Like the land is pulling my thoughts down. Same dream each time. I'm buried alive. Only the soil isn't soil. It's made of hair. Hair and teeth. I can't move. And above me, the tree leans in, speaking in voices of people I've known. My mother, my brother, my old dog Rex. They say, you walked where you weren't invited. You measured what should be worshipped. Now you'll grow the root. Field note. Day 6 I've started losing time. I blacked out this morning and came to kneeling at the base of the tree. Hands sunk wrist deep in the dirt. There were teeth in the soil. Dozens. All baby teeth. Some still had roots. My hands bled from the wrists, but the wounds were clean. I followed my own boot prints back to the tent. They weren't in a straight line. They made a spiral. Field note. Noon I finally saw it. Under the acre. Something breathing. I was standing on the far side, taking new samples when the ground shifted. Not a quake. A ripple like a giant creature inhaling. The dirt split. For a moment I saw flesh under the soil. Red, glistening, veined like lungs. Then it closed again. Like it knew I saw it. Field note. Evening. I can't find the exit anymore. No matter which direction I walk, I come back to the tree. Even walking away from it leads me back to it. The fields around the dead acre have gone gray. All the wheat has wilted, stalks bent like bowed heads. And the sun doesn't move. It's been dusk for 6 hours. The compass just spins. New observation. The tree is growing fruit. At first I thought it was knots in the bark. But they're soft, round. They look like faces. One of them looks like mine. I tried to cut it off with the sample blade. The bark screamed. The entire tree shuddered, and the air filled with a noise like 1,000 mouths chewing glass. I dropped the knife and ran. The face is still there, smiling now. Field note. Night 6 I tried to burn it. Poured gasoline over the roots. Lit the match. The flames rose high fast. For a second I thought it would work. Then I heard laughter. From below. And the fire turned black. Not smoke. Flame. Black as tar climbing the air like hands. I ran back to the tent. The tree wasn't even scorched. I dreamed again. Not of being buried. Of being planted. Fingers stretching into roots. Eyes sealed shut with bark. And far, far below, something that looked like a heart made of mouths opened and whispered, "You're part of the acre now." Field note. Final? The journal pages have started to curl when I write too long. My fingers leave black stains on the paper. I'm not sure I'm writing anymore. I think I'm recording. For who, I don't know. For what? Maybe for whatever comes next. Field note. Day 7. I woke up today with soil in my mouth. Not just grit. Full clumps, packed behind my molars like a plug. My tongue was black, lips cracked and bleeding. My boots are missing. My feet are calloused, almost cloven. There were hoof prints around the tent this morning. Not from an animal. Each print had 5 toes. Like a man pretending to walk like a beast. I tried to scream into the recorder. Nothing played back but laughter. And underneath that, layered into the static, I heard my own voice, saying, "The acre is not a place. It's a decision." Field note. Dusk. I no longer need a flashlight. Everything glows here now. The soil pulses with dim red light, like coals covered in wet ash. And the tree has moved again. It now stands directly outside the tent flap. I didn't hear it move, didn't feel the ground shift. But it's there. Close enough I could reach out and touch it. I won't, because I think it's breathing with me now. Field note. Night 7. I saw others. 3 figures walking the perimeter. Thin, bent, heads twitching like birds. They moved silently through the grass, never breaking stride, never looking toward me. But I knew one of them was Griggs, a surveyor who went missing in '62. I recognized his limp. He was holding a bundle of flags, the kind we use to mark drilling spots. Only they weren't plastic. They were flesh. They came to the tree. One knelt. The others whispered. Then they all sank into the ground like water down a drain. Field note. Late night the tree whispered. Not from a mouth. From its bark. Tiny mouths, hundreds, maybe thousands, opening in the knots and scars. They moved together, speaking as one. The acre is a door. You brought a key. All measures feed it. I dropped my notebook and ran into the wheat field. Away from the tree, desperate. But the stalks were dry paper. They shredded in my hands, turned to ash. And I stepped into the acre again. Right back at the base of the tree. Field note. Day 8. The concept of day has lost all meaning. The sky is pale and sunless. There is no wind. Only the tree and the loop. I found a mirror in my pack, a small compact I kept for shaving. I looked and saw someone else. Eyes black, roots for veins. Smiling. I buried the recorder and this journal under the only rock that doesn't move. If you're reading this, you must have found it. But it's too late. Because if you're reading this, you're on the acre. And now the acre is in you. Warning: unfiled document. Recovered October 1985. Found inside a Department of Agriculture evidence bag. No further field reports filed by Harold Grissom. Dead acre has been deemed geologically unsound. Official cause of property collapse. Sinkhole due to ancient cavern systems. Unofficial note. Do not survey this land. Burn all records. Do not name it. Do not measure it again. But some say late at night in the dead center of Kansas, if you step onto a certain patch of flat, silent earth, your compass will spin. Your eyes will itch. And something beneath the ground will whisper, "One more acre. Just one more." Unfiled audio transcript. Source unknown. Date. Time. Distorted metadata. Corrupt location. Presumed coordinates within Dunnell County. Kansas. Speaker. Assumed Harold Grissom. Low static. Breathing audible. I thought I was done writing. Thought I was buried. But the acre doesn't let you go. It just folds you inward. I don't have a body anymore. Not really. Just a shape in the soil. I think I'm roots now. Silence, soil shifting. They told us to measure land like it's dead. But land remembers. This land, this acre, it's a wound. Not cursed. Infected. Something fell here once. Or was born here. It ate the dead, then the living, then the air. And now it eats memory. I forget my face. My father's voice. But I remember the tree. Official report. Agency recovery team. Site entry log date. October 11, 1985. 3 agents dispatched. 2 returned. 3rd located inside central crater, speaking in nonverbal sound loops. Subject had removed tongue with trowel, carved spiral glyphs into chest. Last recorded word written in blood on a data tablet. Measured wrong. Personal letter found unmailed in truck glove box. Grissom. Addressed to Eleanor Grissom. Age 9. Hey, Peanut. Sorry I missed your birthday. I brought you a pretty rock from the prairie. It's shaped like a heart, but when I held it in my hand, it beat. I think it remembers you. Tell your mom I love her. And if you see a black tree in a dream, don't go near it. Not even once. Not even for me. Anomaly. Military Satellite Survey, November 1985. Coordinates. Redacted show heat bloom with no geological cause. Epicenter shifts 1 foot west per week. Local farms report spontaneous rot, magnetism loss, livestock seizures. Audio bleed reported in weather radios. Faint voices reciting coordinates backward. Term used repeatedly. Acre womb. Personal journal, Grissom, last entry. I tried to leave. Walked until my feet bled. But the paths just turned me back to the center. I saw myself last night, or what I'll become. I stood where the tree was. Only now there's no tree. Just a figure made of bark and memory. Its face was mine, but its mouth opened wider than skin should allow. It said, Harvest time. Unrecorded phenomena. Local report, 1986 in Dunnell County. Cows born with hooves shaped like hands. Corn with teeth. Fields that bleed when plowed. And a single silent acre where no one goes. No animals cross it. No children are born within 10 miles. But sometimes late at night, if you walk the edge of the field, you'll see a man made of mud and roots. And he'll say, What you sow, you serve. Redacted agency memorandum, internal eyes only date. January 12, 1986. Subject. Termination of ACR 4032 KS, Dead Acre. Classification. Level 7. Containment priority, the land cannot be neutralized. Burn attempts regenerate root systems. Concrete pores vanish within 72 hours. GPS fails within perimeter. Area now emits low-frequency resonance, affecting cognition. Surveyor Harold Grissom presumed assimilated. Body unrecoverable. Behavioral shift observed in nearby flora, fauna, and local population. Recommendation. Quarantine by generational folklore. Let it become a ghost story. The land will hide itself if no one comes looking. Do not name it again. Naming feeds it. Memory feeds it. Unverified tape transcript. Source unknown, undated. Possibly found with journal fragments, voice unstable.
Probable. Grissom.
There's no tree anymore. Just me. They said land was real estate. Parcel. A thing you can fence. But this land, it wants. It chooses. I feel it growing in me. I'm not bones anymore. I'm something rooted. Don't step on this acre. Don't even speak its shape. Every step is a promise. Local legend, Dunnell County Folktale, collected 1993. Children in nearby counties sing a song they don't know who taught them. They sing it near fields that feel too still. No one knows why, but they stop when the wind dies. The words go, Step not in the silent square, where soil sings and roots ensnare. Don't measure, dig, or mark the ground, or sleep beneath without a sound. If you hear a man who hums, dig no holes and bite no plums. Turn away and count to 3, lest you feed the acre tree. Final entry, unconfirmed, found scratched into an aluminum clipboard near the edge of the Dead Acre site, 1988. I am not Hal anymore. I am what feeds the loop. My roots are under you now. Say my name and you're already inside. This land is measured in memory. Thanks for riding through the darkness with me. If your skin's still crawling, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss our next sinister saga. Share this with a friend who loves a good scare, and I'll see you under the harvest moon. Stay haunted,